Selamat datang di Padma Resort Legian. Keselamatan Anda adalah keutamaan kami. Kami akan menunjukkan prosedur keamanan dan keselamatan saat terjadinya keadaan darurat. Terima kasih atas perhatian Anda. Padma Resort Legian dilengkapi dengan sistem kendali yang dimonitor selama 24 jam. Setiap ruang pertemuan dilengkapi dengan sensor pendeteksi asap, alat percikan air, alarm api, alat pemadam api, serta sistem pengumuman publik. Area ruang pertemuan memiliki 3 pintu keluar menuju titik kumpul. Mohon untuk tidak panik. Apabila terjadi keadaan darurat atau alarm api menyala, petugas kami akan mengarahkan Anda ke pintu keluar terdekat menuju titik kumpul. Apabila alarm tsunami berbunyi, petugas kami akan mengarahkan Anda menuju titik kumpul yang berada di lantai 4. Terima kasih atas kepercayaan Anda dan selamat beraktivitas di Padma Resort Legian.
Good morning, distinguished guests, government officials, G20 delegates, speakers, participants, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Caroline Surahman. We'd like to welcome you to the third G20 International Standards Summit 2022 right here in Bali, Indonesia. This year's summit is organized by the National Standardization Agency of Indonesia, BSN, together with the IAC International Electrotechnical Commission, ISO International Organization for Standardization, and ITU International Telecommunication Union, with the participation of the WTO World Trade Organization under the auspices of the Indonesia G20 Presidency, alongside G20 strategic multilateral platform that brings together the world's major developed and also emerging economies. This international summit will establish ways in which the institutional framework of the international standard bodies can help governments and also regulators around the world. It will examine the role of standards in turning policies into concrete actions to implement objectives related to better health, digital transformation, sustainable energy transition, and sustainable development goals. Together with the representative from governments, also industry, academia, think tanks, and civil society, we'll explore how the solution to these issues can be built on the foundation provided by international standards. We would like to begin by greeting our honorable guests, in which, whether in person or attending this summit virtually, His Excellency Dr. H.C. Insinyur Erlangga Hartarto, MBA, MMT, our Coordinating Minister for Economic Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia, Mr. Kuku S. Ahmad, Chairman of the National Standardization Agency of Indonesia, Mr. Jean-Marie Paugam, Deputy Director General of WTO, Mr. or Dr. In-Pao Chiu, President of IEC, Ms. Ulrika Furki as the President of ISO, Mr. Holin Chow, Secretary General of ITU, Riccardo Lama, President of the Italian Electrotechnical Committee, CEI, Italy, and also Mr. Pramod Kumar Tiwari as the Director General of the Bureau of Indian Standards, India. And of course, to all participants and also speakers that has been joining us right here in person in Bali, and of course, for all of you that is joining us virtually around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to participate and ask you to participate singing the Indonesian national anthem song, Indonesia Raya. With that said, please rise.
Indonesia
Ladies and gentlemen, you may please be seated.
For the first time, Indonesia hosts the G20 Presidency, a forum of international economic cooperation with members of the world's major economies.
Kepercayaan ini adalah kesempatan bagi Indonesia untuk berkontribusi lebih besar bagi pemulihan ekonomi dunia, untuk membangun tata kelola dunia yang lebih sehat, lebih adil dan berkelanjutan, berdasarkan kemerdekaan, perdamaian abadi, dan keadilan sosial.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was the video opening.
Now, the world is in another multi-dimensional crisis due to the COVID-19 pandemic. As a group of the world's major economies with political and economic power, the G20 can drive the world's recovery. Therefore, the Indonesian G20 presidency invites the whole world to work hand in hand, support each other, to recover together, recover stronger. To achieve this target, the Indonesian presidency is focusing on 3 priority sectors as the key for a strong and sustainable recovery. As the side event of Indonesia G20 Presidency, World Standards Cooperation (WSC), consisting of International Electrotechnical Commission (IEC), International Organization for Standardization (ISO), and International Telecommunication Union (ITU), together with the National Standardization Agency of Indonesia (BSN), and in collaboration with the World Trade Organization (WTO), organized the International Standards Summit 2022 in Bali on 20 October 2022. The International Standards Summit 2022 promotes the role of international standards in supporting policies into concrete actions to achieve global recovery goals. This summit raised 4 topics: better health, accelerating digital transformation, energy transition and security, and how to reach net zero and the Sustainable Development Goals (SDGs). Through this forum, stakeholders and policymakers can exchange experiences and perspectives on the important role of international standards in global trade and social and economic development. We believe international standards can contribute to an inclusive global recovery.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was our video opening of the G20 International Standards Summit of the year 2022 with the 4 pillar themes. That will be our session. But before that, we do have a keynote speech that is given through a video by His Excellency Dr. A.C. Insinyur Erlangga Hartarto, MBA, MMT, our Coordinating Minister for Economic Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia.
Honorable the National Standardization Agency, Chairman, International Electrotechnical Commission President, International Organization for Standardization President, Honorable International Telecommunication Union Secretary General, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning and good evening to those who join this event virtually. It is a great honor to speak in this G20 International Standards Summit today. This event is very essential as today, 1 month away from the summit, we really need every stakeholder's support to ensure that the Bali summit will be fruitful and benefiting for many people. My apologies that I cannot be in person among you in Bali. I believe that the beauty of Bali will bring the peace that the world needs today. Distinguished participants, as the premier global economic forum, the G20 under Indonesia leadership will set up a political guidance to meet the 2030 SDGs by leaving no one behind. We should do this together. What we have learned from the pandemic, we are strongest when we work together. With all these global threats lurking simultaneously, there is no choice. We cannot recover stronger unless we recover together. A stronger recovery means publicly accountable policy are enacted. We need to make policy accountable, especially in this unprecedented time of crisis. Because people who are fighting the pandemic and struggling to sustain their livelihood are primarily the stakeholder. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, as discussed in Rome last year, the International Standardization Agency must drive forward their multilateral effort as we navigate through the unstable times and look ahead to a robust, balanced, and inclusive global economic recovery. A shared commitment to contribute to sustainable recovery process is a must. We appreciate all standardization agency of G20 members' effort led by BSN under the Indonesia presidency to continue demonstrating a strong commitment to utilizing standards, shielding the community, and improving the business world. Good quality of standards become more important in global trade and business sectors. They help harmonize technical specification of product and services, making the industry more efficient. For consumers, standards are not only improving customer confidence that their products are safe, reliable, and assured, but also bringing economic benefit for countries. First, for business sectors, standardization are strategic tools and guidelines to help companies tackle some of the most demanding challenges of modern business. They ensure that business operations are as efficient as possible, improve productivity, enhance customer satisfaction, and help companies access the new markets. Second, for the government, standards adopted by government help to ensure the requirement of import and export are at the same all over the world, therefore facilitating the movement of goods, services, and technologies from country to another. Beyond that, they will be protect the planet from potential environment damage such as emission of gases and radiation. They also bring about technological, economical, and societal benefit. Collaborating among government, business sectors, and standardization agency are very important. This forum allows International Standardization Agency from G20 members to meet and discuss how the deliverables can be translated into policy of action to boost trade transactions among G20 countries and to achieve SDGs target. Countries are left with no choice but to strengthen collaboration. The spirit of working together for a resilient future must be embedded. As G20 presidency this year, Indonesia is ready to lead the developed and emerging economies, taking the global recovery as a common goal. Distinguished participants, at the G20 summit, the international standard, several topics regarding standardization on health aspect and economic recovery will be discussed in accordance with G20 theme of Recover Together and Recover Stronger. Under this theme, we have to be firm in our multilateral commitment to strengthen the global economic recovery and resilience. This event offers an opportunity to showcase not only the Indonesian government's commitment, but also G20 commitments to the world in terms of facilitating good regulation to protect the people and increase competitiveness in the business world. Today, we discuss these issues and seek concurrence on the proposed deliverables. However, please kindly bear in mind that this will not be the presidency achievement, but these are the achievement of the collective member of the G20. Therefore, I would like to use this opportunity to build trust among us and cooperate to achieve our common goals. we have to send a clear message to the international community that not only G20 has strong commitment, but we are also able to put those commitments into concrete action. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much to our Coordinating Minister for Economic Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia, Dr. A.C. Insinyur Erlangga Hartarto, MBA, MMT. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, now we'd like to proceed to our next agenda, and that is hearing the welcoming remarks by the chairman of BSN. Please welcome Mr. Kuku S. Ahmed.
His Excellency Dr. Erlangga Hartarto, the Coordinating Minister for Economic Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia, Pak Dr. Andes I. Ketut Adiarsa MH, Kepala Biro PBJ dan Perekonomian Provinsi Bali, selaku tuan rumah, terima kasih sudah hadir. Dr. Yin Piaosu, the IEC President, is going to give the speech through video. And then also the ISO President is Ulrika Franke, ITU Secretary General, Mr. Holin Zhou, and Mr. Philip Metzger, so he is here with us physically. The IEC Secretary General, Mr. Sergio Mojica, also attending physically here, the ISO Secretary General, Mr. Chai Supli, the Director of ITU, CEO or representatives from standard body, from G20 members, distinguished speaker, ladies and gentlemen. A very good morning, or probably good afternoon or good evening to all of you who join with us, probably virtually. It is my great pleasure to welcoming you all to this important event of G20 International Standards Summit 2022 under the auspices of Indonesia G20 Presidency. It is a great opportunity for Indonesia to give a significant contribution to global economic recovery. Accordingly, Indonesia G20 Presidency carries the theme Recover Together, Recover Stronger. With this theme, Indonesia G20 Presidency is expected to provide a new spirit to create a better world that not only provides welfare and prosperity, but also ensures the sustainability of life in the future. In this good opportunity, I would like to thank all of you who has taken part in today's important event. This event is organized by World Standard Cooperation, which consists of IEC, ISO, and ITU in collaboration with BSN and with the support from WTO. Ladies and gentlemen, international standard plays a key role in global economy and facilitating trade among G20 members. In this important community, Indonesia believes that international standards developed by the collaboration of three organizations, namely ISO, IEC, and ITU, become recognized globally, support sustainability development goals, and improving a country's national quality infrastructure. The development of standards requires consensus, collaboration, and innovation, taking into account scientific justification. It is not surprising that standards are widely used, including in occupational health, quality and safety system, environmental protection, and also in determining the social aspect of sustainable development. Distinguished delegate, ladies and gentlemen, Indonesia has set recover together, recover stronger, as the main theme of this year that refers to how global economic recovery requires coordination and collaboration in all aspects. Indonesia chose this theme since the world is currently under pressure due to the COVID-19 pandemic, requiring joint and inclusive effort in finding a way out or solution for recovery. The spirit of Recover Together is clearly reflected in the logo of Indonesian presidency. This logo illustrates the determination of Indonesian G20 presidency to promote the world's recovery after 2 years of struggle against the COVID-19 pandemic. Red and white color background in the logo, as well as a gunungan silhouette, a shadow puppet depicting a mountain, strongly shows Indonesian identity as a nation. The gunungan symbolize life, especially the transition to a new chapter. It reflects optimism and enthusiasm to recover from the pandemic and enter a new chapter of green and inclusive development. There is also a special batik motif, we call it kawung, which philosophically symbolizes the spirit to be useful to others. Distinguished delegate, ladies and gentlemen, before I end my remarks, I would like to encourage you to enjoy Bali in your spare time, and even it would be a good idea also to stay longer here to explore this piece of paradise island. Bali has plenty of magical temples reflecting spiritual life of Balinese people. Bali has long been an example of unity in diversity, living side by side in peace and harmony with our brothers and sisters from different cultures and religions. This is truly Indonesian experience, as the old wisdom says that we are only as strong as we are united, as weak as we are divided. To end my welcome remarks, I wish you all to have a fruitful discussion and looking forward to having your contribution to the summit. Enjoy Bali and stay healthy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kuku S. Ahmad, as the chairman of BSN. And now, as mentioned by Mr. Kuku before, we do have some video messages by our leaders since we are having our summit today by hybrid event. So these video messages will be played for you, ladies and gentlemen, and also participants that is joining us through virtually. And we begin with our first video message by Deputy Director General of WTO, Mr. Jean-Marie Pelgam.
Ladies and gentlemen, did you know that a flower grown and flown from Kenya to the UK had a carbon footprint over 10 times lower than those produced in a northern European country and exported by boat to the UK? How can the Kenyan producer measure it and prove it to its customer? What metric will support a more sustainable trade against the most climate adverse? My name is Jean-Marie Pelgam. I am Deputy Director General at the World Trade Organization. I'm very pleased to say a few words at the opening of this important G20 Summit on International Standards, hosted by the government of Indonesia. I want to focus on the environment and standards, a top priority for world trade. Just as with the example from Kenya, standards have a central role in the transition to a net zero economy. If we do not have common standards, we will instead create fragmentation. Imagine a spaghetti bowl of standards and different methods of verifying those standards. This type of fragmentation leads to higher costs, uncertainty, and possibly trade barriers. It happened that the WTO rules gives us a role in standards and regulation. The WTO Technical Barriers to Trade, TBT, this agreement guides global standard development and promotes alignment with relevant international standards to facilitate global trade. Our rules call for transparency, openness, and inclusivity of developing countries to ensure globally relevant standards, and this applies also to decarbonization standards. These rules help separate genuine efforts to achieve environmental policy goals from protectionist ones. Standards are critical for businesses. Businesses are on the front line leading the effort toward decarbonization. They need to be fully involved in standard setting activities. Only then can we be serious about coherence in carbon standards. Take steel as an example. To achieve net zero targets, we know that decarbonization of the iron and steel industry in the value chain is critical. Indeed, iron and steel are essential inputs in nearly every facet of modern life, from construction to transportation and energy, amongst others. So, we need to find ways to produce steel and other materials like cement and aluminium with significantly lower carbon emissions. It is positive to see a wide variety of public and private initiatives and standards for decarbonizing the steel sector at the international, regional, national, and company levels. But so much diversity can create uncertainty for businesses and trade. What we need are standards that are suitable for different production routes and technologies, different countries, and enable comparison between products to allow firms, consumers, and governments to take better decisions. As WTO members move at different paces in developing low-carbon markets, we need to move toward a just transition by ensuring that developing and least developed countries can be part of the low-carbon value chains and the standard-setting efforts. This means broad participation in standard-setting activities. It is essential, whether at home, at the national level, at the regional, or internationally. The WTO's Technical Barriers to Trade agreement calls for 6 principles for the development of international standards. One of these, the principle on development, recommends facilitating participation by developing countries and capacity building within international standard-setting bodies, including through technical assistance. We must explore ways to broaden and deepen developing country participations in standardizing activities. At the WTO, we will do what we can to support relevant international standards bodies and international cooperation. We want to promote inclusiveness and responsiveness on these issues, whether we are talking about carbon standards, health and safety, or digitalization, all areas that I understand you will speak about today. With that, let me wish you a good and very productive summit. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for your video remarks by Mr. Jean-Marie Pelgam. Our following videos comes from Dr. Yin Piao Chu as IEC President, Ms. Ulrika Franke as the ISO President, and Mr. Ho-Ling Chow as the ITU Secretary General. Let's take a look.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and friends, on behalf of the IEC, we welcome you to the G20 International Standards Summit 2022. We are pleased to organize this Standards Summit alongside our partners in the World Standards Corporation, ISO and the ITU, as well as the WTO and the BSN. This is the 3rd International Standards Summit that the World Standards Corporation has organized. I am pleased to see that it is having a wide resonance beyond the standardization community. Last year, the G20 Rome Leaders Declaration highlighted the importance of international standards. this year via an official G20 side event under the auspices of the G20 Presidency of Indonesia. The global community continues to grapple with the consequences of a global pandemic and must address the looming environmental and economic challenges ahead. I believe that international standards can provide solutions. The theme of this year's G20, Recover Together, Recover Stronger, aligns with one of the core principles of the standardization community, collaboration and cooperation. We are a global community of dedicated experts representing government, industry, and academia, working together to advance a better world. Today's summit will showcase how standards and conformity assessment contribute to better health, accelerating the digital transformation for all, and achieving our net zero and sustainable development goals. I would like to thank BSN for your tremendous support in helping us to organize this G20 International Standards Summit. Please enjoy today's discussions. Thank you.
A warm welcome to you all to this landmark in collaboration and progress through standards. It is with great enthusiasm and expectations that ISO, together with BSN, our partners in World Standards Corporation, the IEC and ITU, and the World Trade Organization, are building on the momentum of the G20 recognition of the enabling power of standards. This year, the context of Indonesia's G20 presidency, Recover Together, Recover Stronger, provides an opportunity to enable change that will empower a generation to build a better world for all. This can only happen when we have strong foundations. Global health architecture, sustainable energy transition, and digital transformation are the strategic priorities for Indonesia during the G20 presidency. There are many who are watching closely. Not only is Indonesia the economic powerhouse of the region, but as one of the largest and most populous states, Indonesia is responding to the threats of global climate change and a world in transition. On this last aspect, there have been remarkable advances, and it is in part thanks to the actions of its young and dynamic population that the country has sprung back from the economic impacts of COVID. But it's also the willingness to work together with others to identify new solutions that inspires me. I have great confidence for the future of Indonesia and its fellow G20 members who are determining those solutions through collaboration and the power of standards. Thank you.
Dear colleagues, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to greet this third edition of the G20 International Standards Summit, co-organized by ITU with the National Standardization Agency of Indonesia, BSA, as well as our partners in the World Standards Corporation, IEC and ISO, with the support of WTO. I want to thank the Indonesia government for making ITU a knowledge partner of the digital economy track of its G20 presidency this year. It's a recognition of the important role that ITU plays in addressing some of the world's most pressing global challenges. Today's summit will focus on the actions required to address some of these challenges, including achieving better health, effective and sustainable digital transformation, energy security, clean energy, and net zero emissions. These are at the heart of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, call for global action. And we can reinforce this action by working together in international standardization, which is one of ITU's core competences. I bring this message to G20 leaders in the firm belief that the commitment to inclusive standardization processes can place everyone in a stronger position to achieve their ambitions in sustainable development. Standard development calls for the participation of everyone, that we are relying on the resulting standards. ITU's work is driven by your contributions and consensus decisions. Our process ensures that all participants' voices are heard, and I urge you to make your voice known. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the video remarks by Dr. In Pao Chu and Ms. Ulrika Franke and Mr. Ho Lin Chow. Next in our agenda, ladies and gentlemen and distinguished delegates, we do have a G20 Presidency introduction by BSN Deputy Chairman for Standard Development, Mr. Hendro Kusumo SP, and also following a video remarks by Italy G20 Presidency 2021 remarks by Mr. Riccardo Lama, President of CEI Italy, and from India G20 Presidency 2023 remarks by Mr. Pramod Kumar Tiwari, Director of General of BIS India. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Hendro Kusumo, SP.
Very good morning to all of you here in Bali, and also good afternoon and evening to everybody who might joining this event virtually. First of all, I would like to convey our sincere thanks to Italy for host excellent leadership during the G20 International Standards Summit on People, Planet, Prosperity under the auspice of G20 Italy Presidency in 2021. Fortunately, in line with the world recovery from global pandemic of COVID, we are delighted to conduct the on-site summit here in Bali this year. Distinguished speaker and ladies and gentlemen, international standard together with conformity assessment can significantly contribute to the most policy objective related to the health aspect. They are innately inclusive and consensus built based on global collaboration and expertise. As G20 presidency this year, Indonesian government had set 3 pillars as the key for a strong and sustainability recovery, which covering, first is strengthening a global health architecture. Then second is digital transformation. Third is energy security and sustainability energy transition. In addition to the 3 pillars above, International Standard Summit commit to add more issues to be highlighted that are net zero and SDG. With regard to strengthening of global health architecture, it is evident that the current pandemic, that the global health architecture need to be strengthened. This is not only to face the current pandemic, but also to prepare all of the world to respond better and have the proper capacity to deal with the future health crisis might arise. Digital transformation is one of the key solutions in moving the economy during a pandemic and has become a new source of economic growth. Taking into account this evidence, the summit is also focused on enhancing digital skill and digital literacy to ensure that an inclusive digital transformation for all. Furthermore, the summit will also promote energy transition toward the new and sustainable energy by prioritizing energy security, accessibility, and affordability. This will enhance and ensure a green and sustainable future and manage the climate change issues more effectively. Finally, international standards contribute significantly to support and in achievement of target and indicator of all 17 SDG. We believe together with the testing and certification, they measure and mitigate an adverse climate impact with the aim toward achieving zero emission policy objective. Ladies and gentlemen, we have here representative from national standard body of G20 members and also observer from the respective institution. In addition, we have an international speaker and expert coming from international organization related to topic which are being discussed in this summit. As for Indonesia, we have a good collaboration with standardization organization as a British Standard Institution, UK, and then Standard Australia, Bureau of Indian Standard, and other. And we have those cooperation to strengthen our national quality infrastructure in facing the challenge of globalization. This summit might happen successfully with the contribution from the World Standard Cooperation, ISO, IEC, and ITU, and supported with the World Trade Organization. And of course, with the great job from organizing committee, my colleague there behind. However, the summit will not believe its expected aim without your actively participation. I therefore look forward to have your idea, input, and talk during this summit. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, honorable government officials, distinguished keynote speakers and panelists, presidents and secretaries of international standardization bodies and national committees, it is a pleasure for me to welcome you to the G20 International Standards Summit 2022. I am especially proud to contribute introducing this G20 related meeting, which our Saudi Arabian colleagues started under their G20 presidency 2 years ago, and that the Italian and now the Indonesian national committees helped transforming in a hopefully permanent event, which our Indian fellows are going to host next year. We are living in a time in which geographical boundaries can be overcome, both physically and in terms of information exchange. But we keep learning that this condition also involves responsibilities, as big natural phenomena, epidemic diseases, and the consequences on climate of human decisions and actions cannot be any more confined in the place where they originated. We must be able not to miss the opportunities of the potential we share, giving the word together a meaning that is full and deep as never before. We must do it as universal issues such as health, digital transformation, sustainable energy transition, and more in general, or United Nations SDGs, require joint efforts to achieve the necessary results. Doing things together is the natural way of working of international standardization bodies ISO, IC, and ITU, global organization through which distinguished experts put in common their knowledge to achieve voluntary convergence on best practices, delivering innovative, interoperable, flexible solutions capable of integrating environmental, social, and economic issues. We strongly believe that international standards can be an inclusive and sustainable foundation for growth, supporting G20 leaders' commitment, as included in the final statements in Rome, to reinforce their actions and international cooperations towards the digital transformation of production, processes, services, and business models. We hope G20 trust in the standardization community can be renewed here in Bali. I stop here. Welcome again. I'm sure we will experience an interesting and fruitful discussion together.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to all of you. It gives me immense pleasure to be a part of the G20 International Standards Summit in Indonesia and share my thoughts on this occasion. India truly believes in the recovery together, recovery a stronger message set forth by Indonesia under its G20 presidency, which is aligned with one of the core philosophies of India, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which means the world is one big family. We must strive to build a better world, a composite and inclusive world, a world at peace with itself and at peace with nature. For a strong, sustainable, balanced and inclusive recovery of the global economies, it is imperative to ensure collective progress of all nations. We firmly stand with the world in overcoming the current challenges and also any potential future crisis, including the pandemic. The global pandemic has affected every aspect of our lives, from health, jobs, and education to financial security and social relations. Now is the time to intensify efforts to address them. We must prepare for an inclusive and transformative recovery together with a people-centric approach. Here I would like to emphasize that international standards can play a very important role in achieving an inclusive global recovery, and that priority areas identified by Indonesia, that is global health, digital transformation and sustainability, energy transition, are apt in the current scenario. In the contemporary world, standards are getting more and more relevant since we all face an immediate challenge to build back better. It comes as no surprise that the role of standards in tackling the public health concerns in the light of the repercussions of the pandemic on health and well-being has increased multifold. Enhanced innovations, be it in terms of vaccine development, digital health infrastructure, public health workforce operations, require standards which are agile, uncertainty ready, interpretable, and deliverable within a short time. Based on our pandemic experience in India, we feel that the international standards together with conformity assessment can significantly contribute to most of the policy objectives related to health. Thus, I request all the member countries of G20 to join hands and develop low-cost mitigation technologies for testing and treatment powered by harmonious international standards which cater to the needs of global health. I wish to inform that India has adopted a people-centric approach and operationalized the largest vaccination program in the world. And we would also like to be one of the key players in building the global health architecture. I'm sure that every G20 country must be having its own pandemic experience when it comes to strengthening their health architecture for emergency preparedness, response, and resilience. Every experience is unique in its nature and may help others to adopt or adapt them for larger benefits. Thus, there is a need to share that knowledge and experience to build consensus-based international standards to further strengthen the global health architecture through a collective effort of G20. Friends, cutting-edge technologies such as 5G, artificial intelligence, and machine learning, or blockchain, augmented reality, virtual reality, deep learning, etc., are critical for any government or industry. for the purposes of planning, decision making, and expediting development or analyzing problem solving, or for detecting new trends or drawing out linkages and associations. These technologies are being extensively used across the globe in almost all sectors. Post-pandemic, most of the G20 nations are undergoing a massive digital transformation with primary focus on low-cost, developmental, and potentially homegrown technology. However, I request you all to bridge the digital divide and steer in digital inclusion in your journey of transformation. India has its own story of developing digital public goods like Unified Payment Interface, Bharat QR for financial transactions, Aadhaar, a unique citizen identification system of India. These have enhanced the ease, transparency, and the speed with which individuals, markets, and governments interact with each other. These digital public goods frequently use the international and indigenously developed standards and are instrumental in achieving the UN SDGs. Friends, in recent times, several G20 nations would be rolling out or would have already launched 5G services. It is believed that 5G will provide reliable and efficient connection speeds that would improve the delivery and quality of services, be it digital learning, health informatics, e-commerce, etc., and will make our lives better and safer. Recognizing the importance of digital technologies and the role of international standards in these areas, it is high time G20 nations revisit their strategies for developing and diffusing technology while maintaining a consensus amongst one another. This can be achieved with more and deeper engagement, better sharing of knowledge on global platforms provided by international standard setting organizations like ISO and IEC. Friends, the G20 nations have an important mandate of tackling environmental challenges and climate change issues while promoting transitions towards more flexible, transparent, and clean energy systems. India is a strong proponent of sustainable energy transition. While we are making great progress in digital technologies, at the same time, it is also home to one of the largest clean energy expansion programs. The country has pledged to meet 50% of its energy requirements, which would be 500 gigawatt from renewable sources by 2030, which shows our intent to transition to sustainable energy solutions. We wish that G20 nations think over pioneering a new model of economic development that would avoid carbon-intensive approach and provide a blueprint for other economies as well. I would like to reaffirm that opportunities like electric mobility, carbon recycling, microgrids, green hydrogen, and green bonds, utility-scale solar, consumer-centric clean tech, etc., have the potential to reach the goal of net zero. Friends, India truly believes that standards are instrumental in achieving the shared global vision of net zero, circular economy, and sustainable development. The world must put rigorous efforts in developing solutions and services which cater to the new era of industrialization, marked by Industry 4.0, digitization, and innovation. Standards play a vital role in turning policies into concrete actions to implement objectives related to digital transformation, health, sustainable energy transition, and sustainable development goals. I strongly believe that sharing challenges and experiences in tackling the various issues related to standards and standardization processes would help us make our lives easier, safer, and better. International standardization organizations are therefore playing a crucial role in providing a common platform to discuss and come up with common and most suitable solutions to these issues. By ensuring diversity and inclusivity in the standard formulation and related processes, these international organizations are going to play a bigger role in times to come. In the end, I would like to thank the Indonesian Standardization Body, BSN, the host, and IEC, ISO, and ITU co-organizers for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts with you, and hope that the dialogue and cooperation in all these areas will gain further momentum under Indian G20 presidency as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your remarks, Mr. Pramod Kumar Tiwari. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to begin our first session of the G20 International Standards Summit 2022. But before that, we'd like to also convey a message to our participants and also delegates that will be joining us through virtual. You can please do summit, and we want you to participate and be active throughout our session. And for those delegates that is here in person, you may raise your hand if you have questions every session. And for those of you that is joining us through our live stream, you can note and you can input your question through our column chat, whichever platform that you are on right now. So thank you very much for that. And of course, before we begin, we'd like to convey our most thank you to our speakers and also to all delegates. Hence, we are conducting this event today through hybrid, and especially for those in particular different time zone with us. Thank you very much for your participation and also cooperation. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we are ready with our setup right here for the first session. And as we know, for the G20 International Standards Summit 2022, we do have 4 pillars of theme that will brought up today in this summit. We begin with our first, and that is better health. Now, the objective of this session itself, where the path to global recovery will require collective cooperation that ensures equality of global health standards and closer collaboration to ensure future resilience. Health system needs to be inclusive, it needs to be equitable, and also responsive. Now, international standards in conjunction with conformity assessment can provide both the tools and also contribute the majority of policy objectives related to health. They offer solutions and also the full support spectrum of services from medical devices to health organization management, and in many countries provide the foundation for technical regulations. Based on global expertise and collaboration, the solution encompasses international consensus and best practices while ensuring safety, reliability, and also performance. Now, they enable the introduction of new technologies and help expand their availability to all parts of the world. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, for this session, would like to introduce to you our keynote speaker, alongside with the panels of speaker for this session. We have Dr. Anda Lucia Rizka Andalusia, General Director of Pharmacy and Medical Devices from the Indonesian Ministry of Health. Also joining us, Mr. Scott Colburn, US FDA. Mr. Encik Ahmad Sharif, Chief Executive Officer, Medical Device Authority, Malaysia. Mr. Peter Williams, Executive Director, Healthcare Industry, Oracle JPAC. And Ms. Sean Yu, Vice Chairman, ITUT Focus Group on Artificial Intelligence for Health, FGAI4H, China Academy of Information and Communication Technology, CAICT. So ladies and gentlemen, let us begin and embark our first session for giving the time and also the platform for Dr. Anda Lucia Rizka Andalusia to share her keynote speech. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Lucia Rizka Andalusia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, moderator. Very good morning to all of the speaker and distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to congratulate BSN for convening G20 International Standards Summit. I note the ISS is a high-level collaborative that involves the International Organization for Standardization, International Electronical Commission, International Telecommunication Union, and is supported by World Trade Organization. Further, this year meeting of ISS is discussing the global health architecture. This theme is pertinent and part of our priority in Indonesia G20 presidency. Therefore, I thank you for the opportunity to share with you our perspective on the advanced transformative health infrastructure standards. Learning from pandemic handling, Ministry of Health is in progress to implement health system transformation plan for 2021 to 2024. This plan was built to ensure the accomplishment of national mandate for health development, which state in our national medium-term development plan, and to provide a stronger national health system to contribute on regional and global health development. As a focus on health system transformation consists of 6 pillars, and in this presentation, I will focus on health system resilience transformation pillar. It is the 3rd pillar. On the 3rd pillar, we are on progress to transform our health system resilience. As lesson learned from the COVID-19 pandemic, it is vital for Indonesia to build our system more resilient. This will be achieved by boosting the local production of medical devices. Next slide. In implementing the health system resilience transformation, there is a need to improving resilience of pharma and medical devices sector. This action needs the use of international standards into the aspect of national regulation. There are some aspects why the use of international standards become the need of and the urgency. The first is advantage and benefit because support societal and environmental policies, offer consumer protection, are used across different markets, reflect the state of the art, disseminate new technologies. And the second are to ensure the trade flows freely and support trade facilitation. And the use of international standards is in helping to achieve the implementation of technical barriers to trade, or we call it TBT. And the third are market economics, domestic manufacturing and services, a culture of competition, consumer protection with organized group, system for standards, quality, accreditation, metrology, a demand for harmonization, refers to the process of resolving disputes. Next slide. In this slide, I would like to give an example the use of international standards in medical device sector. Indonesia medical device regulation based on global practices and international standards. There are 5 aspects that become the main concern. These are pre-market control, post-market control, the use of standard, clinical performance and safety, and quality management system. If we took a look at the standard, there are the common pattern use of medical devices international standard, and it refers to the management and technical requires as ISO 17025, testing and calibration laboratories, and ISO 1471, risk management for medical devices, and ISO 134825, quality management system for medical devices. For ensure the safety, quality, and efficacy or performance of the medical devices, there are several international standards that should be referred. In example, IEC 60601 for safety of electrical, IEC 62366 for usability, and any specific standard from IEC and ISO, including software for medical devices, which refer to ISO 62309. Next slide. The controlling of medical device in Indonesia is done to ensure that the device is safety, quality, and have good performance when it is used by the user, and the final aim to ensure the patient safety. The controlling of medical device is conducted in pre-market before the device distributed and in the post-market when the device is in the market according to the life cycle of the medical device. It means that the quality and safety must be ensured from the device is manufactured by manufacturer, then distributed by the distributor until the device has achieved its lifespan and need to be disposed. Manufacturer of medical device has to have business licensing and also implement the certified of good manufacturing practice for medical device. Distributor of medical device has to distribute license and also implement the certified of good distribution practice for medical device. And all the states of the medical device life cycle must be ensured that it will produce the safety and quality products. To ensure this regulation is needed to provide any information that must be new and implemented by the manufacturer and distributor and also by user of medical devices. In addition, each of medical device before distributed in Indonesia must also have marketing license or product approval license. To get the marketing license, medical device must fulfill product standards. Indonesia has required that all medical device must fulfill standard of medical device, either national or international standards. Indonesia has national standard of medical device that known as SNI. It is now a 294 SNI that identically adopted from international standard like ISO and IEC. The post-market controlling of medical market controlling of medical device, including supervision of production and distribution facilities, and post-market surveillance such as sampling and testing of product, and surveillance adverse event report and investigation and recalls and dispose. Indonesia has developed standards related to medical device that aim to improve product safety and quality and improve product competitiveness in national and international market. Examples include the Indonesian National Standard for Medical Device, as many as 298 standards. The standard development in Indonesia is in harmony with relevant international standard or adopting international standard, for example, International Organization for Standardization, International Electrotechnical Commission, and European Standard and WHO Standard. Next slide. To achieve the mentioned, we have set policies that span through critical steps and achieving resilient state. We provide policy in research and development, facilitate clinical trial and technology transfer. We also provide policy in production which dedicated to improve the quality and capacity of our manufacturers. Special accelerated access or the red carpet is given to the local products. The government working closely with the local industry to facilitate and improve the implementation on related policies. Next slide. MOH has made various efforts in managing the pandemic COVID-19, one of which is through optimizing function of medical device testing laboratories, such as strengthening the COVID-19 testing laboratory network through optimization of national, regional, and private laboratories, as many as 242 laboratories to carry out COVID-19 examination, development of recording and reporting of COVID-19 examination system through new all record application. Strengthening the post-market surveillance laboratory network by establishing 7 laboratories for testing RDT antigen COVID-19, validity and standard testing method. Preparing the regulation. Next slide. Learning from the efforts have been carried out testing laboratories, we need to support health resilience and fulfilling the availability of quality and innovative domestic medical device. It is necessary to strengthen medical device testing laboratory both in quality and quantity. The challenges is strengthening testing laboratories are the limitation of laboratory facilities and infrastructure, to the need to improve the competence of testing laboratories and fulfillment of standard requirements. The strategy that can be carried out through assessment of laboratory testing capacity, increasing the capacity of laboratory human resources, laboratory standardization through compliance the testing laboratory requirements, monitoring and evaluation of the laboratory in implementation of testing medical device in accordance with the standard. Next slide. Indonesia is in progress to develop a medical device testing laboratory utilizing existing agency called Health Facility Security Center by arranging its organization and function so that its capabilities can be optimized in testing medical devices to support the independence of domestic medical device and post-market surveillance. Next slide. The Minister of Health has also collaborated with to strengthen in vitro diagnostic medical device testing laboratories with WHO representative of Indonesia in order to create an IVD testing laboratory with international standard. In this case, starting with developing a WHO standardized testing laboratory for the lot testing for WHO pre-qualification preference, particularly for malaria RDT testing. This is my last slide. Thank you for the attention and thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lucia Rizka Andalusia, General Director of Pharmacy and Medical Devices of Indonesia Ministry of Health. Thank you for sharing your presentation on a detailed look of the health standardization right here in Indonesia. We're going to come back to you, Dr. Lucia, but before that, we'd like to also introduce again our panelists of speakers. They'll be joining us for this session. We have Mr. Scott Colburn, Mr. Enchik Ahmad Sharif, Mr. Peter Williams, and Ms. Sean Yu. They'll be joining us, in which every speaker will have about 3 to 4 minutes introduction. So we'll begin with the farthest one. It is evening for him right now. So Mr. Scott Colburn, are you joining us right now?
Yes, I am, and good morning to you, and very late evening over here. Wish to thank all the organizers and hosts of the G20 Summit. It is a privilege to be able to come to you today. My name is Scott Colburn. I work for the U.S. Food and Drug Administration Center for Device and Radiological Health, and I'm the director of our Standards and Conformity Assessment Program. Our program works to lead the medical device community in the enhancement and use of consensus standards in the design, development, and evaluation of health technologies across their lifespan. And we work to solve problems and anticipate the opportunities to protect and promote public health through the use of high quality and regulatory ready standards. We are very proud of how we utilize standards here at the FDA and working with our national and international partners across all different stakeholders, which include academia, clinicians, our industry workers, and the thousands of industry companies we work with, and the dozens, if not hundreds, of regulators around the world that all have a common goal of patient safety in mind. At FDA, we utilize standards and get our involvements throughout the development process, but also in how we use them for our regulatory purposes and try to enhance standards to be a least burdensome and common tool to support their assessment of conformity in how we look at medical devices. Our use of standards alone isn't just to help get products into the market, but we also use them to help understand how products go through their total product life cycle, whether it's through its design and development, but also how its impact in public health missions, such as protecting patient safety. And so we want to work with all stakeholders to try to bring key data elements together. And digital health is one of those key areas that we think can help improve this. And so this type of action and what we're doing here today and sharing ways that we think we can enhance in what we do, not just in using standards and conformity assessment, but building alliances through organizations such as this and using other regional and international groups such as IMDRF and Global Harmonization working parties is a key element in making sure that all stakeholders are involved and are helping meet these novel and very important global goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your introduction, Mr. Scott Colburn. And next up, we'd like to give this time for Mr. Ahmad Sharif, Chief Executive Officer, Medical Device Authority from Malaysia.
Hi, good morning and good evening to all. It is a privilege for me to be invited to this forum. So I'm Ahmad Sharif Hambali. I'm the Chief Executive of Medical Device Authority in Malaysia. So which carry out the role and function to regulate medical devices in the Malaysian market. So Medical Device Authority, or MDA in short, was established back in 2013 with a few key objectives. One of them is to ensure that medical devices placed in the market are safe and effective. Since medical devices encompass a very wide variety of products, we have to rely on the use of standards to ensure that they are being designed and manufactured to fulfill the principle of safety and performance. So in medical device industry is rapidly evolving and very highly regulated, with products ranging from as simple as gloves up to sophisticated machines such as CT scanner and implants. So standards are critical in allowing the introduction of new medical device technology while meeting public's and regulators' expectations. So I think these are some of my introduction for this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ahmad Sharif. Now I would like to allow this time for Mr. Peter Williams, Executive Director of Healthcare Industry of Oracle JPAC. The time is yours.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to present today. It's much appreciated. I think the thing that is most important to me is that I currently chair the ISO task force on artificial intelligence in healthcare, and it's a very rapidly evolving space and important. In terms of the challenges, from a technology perspective, the two largest challenges are certainly interoperability and cybersecurity. And from a consumer perspective, it's really about trust and control. Those things have been a challenge for a long time in healthcare, but the rising power of more accessible high-performance computing, and especially cloud computing, is transforming the way that healthcare can be delivered, particularly in areas like genomics and artificial intelligence and virtual care. So those consumer and technology perspectives are intertwined. From a consumer perspective, having trust and control is about feeling confident that their information is secure and their privacy is being protected, that their data won't be used for a purpose they haven't consented to, the idea of nothing is done about me without me. And importantly, that the information is accurate and can be relied upon for their care. Clearly, effective cybersecurity and interoperability are essential to achieve that. And it has to be an appropriate level of interoperability. And by that, I mean not just interconnectedness between systems, but exchanging information that is both meaningful and contextual to the recipient. So while there are challenges, with the right level of international cooperation and focus, we can create that safe, trusted, interconnected ecosystem that we're all looking for. I think a good international example is the work that's been done on the International Patient Summary, which brought together very quickly, with impetus going all the way up to the G7, a solution that's being progressed with collaboration from multiple standards groups, including ISO, the HL7 Fire Community, SNOMED, IHE, and GS1. A more localised example is how a city council in the UK had to pivot its service model during the early days of the pandemic because of a shortage of nursing staff. They put in place a system that called people at home on their phone using a multi-language digital assistant. People didn't need an app, they just spoke when they answered the phone. The system analysed their response using artificial intelligence, populated the central dashboard with recommendations for nursing staff who then acted on that. The impact of all that was they reduced the nurse demand by 30%, saw a large rise in consumer satisfaction with better targeted services. And that technology could do 10,000 calls a minute and is obviously highly effective. But the key is for that sort of innovation to have widespread adoption, it'll be critically dependent for consumer confidence that there are appropriate standards and safeguards in place.
All right, thank you very much to Mr. Peter Williams. And last but not really least, we have Ms. Sean Yu as the Vice Chairman, ITUT Focus Group on Artificial Intelligence for Health from China Academy of Information and Communication Technology.
Thank you. So many thanks for having me in such an important event and discussion. I'm Shanxu from China Academy of Information and Telecommunication Technology. I'm also the Vice Chair of ITU and WHO AI for Health Focus Group, and also the head of WHO Collaborating Center for Digital Health. So I know that today we are going to talk about standardizations for better health. So based on that topic, I would like to briefly share two slides from my experience when doing standardizations on digital health. So one perspective is that from what we have done in China. So as you can see in this chart, my institution, CRACT, is committed to build the digital health ecosystem to facilitate the industry development. We act as an important bridge between the policymakers and also the industry by three kinds of actions. One is the top level, the policy support. The second is the middle layer, the industry alliance. The third is that we are doing standard settings and also evaluation. So this forms a loop that we would like to turn standards as a role to turning policy into concrete actions to implementations related to health. So that means a lot of coordination works needed in this process, but it is the key to this ecosystem. So another perspective is that when I work for the ITU and WHO AI for Health Focus Group, so the key takeaways here is still a cross-sector collaboration. So as you can see, we hold meetings for over 16 times in different continents, and we work very close with different kinds of members. And for example, members from research, healthcare, and regulations, and also ICT experts. How we organize or coordinate this kinds of group is that we're working in what I have showed in this picture as a matrix. So as you can see, the horizontal ones are general specifications that, for example, you consider the regulations, evaluations, data buyers, or how you train your model. And then the vertical ones is the specific health domains. For example, how you use AI to predict an elderly forms or some an eye disease, skin disease, etc. So in this way, I would like to emphasize that when we are doing standards, it is important to consider how you promote it, how you use it, how you socialize it, and also to working together, especially with an ICT and health experts from different kinds of group or multiple stakeholders. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Ms. Shanxu for your presentations and also for the introduction by all speakers for the session. Now we're going for a round of questions before we are giving the time for our delegates, either in person, also virtually, to ask their questions. And we'd like to thank you to our speakers. But before that, we'd like to give information that Dr. Lucia Rizkanda Lucia, because of other agendas, that she cannot attend for our round of questions and also Q&A session. I would like to thank you for her participation as our keynote speaker for the first session of our G20 International Standards Summit 2022. With that said, we're going to go straight to our speakers right now and to our panelists of speakers. If you have any other responses, if this question was not directed to you, you may do so, raise your hand, or you can just unmute yourself, and then you can also give your responses to this. So we'll begin with our first round of question, and that is in the terms of using standards to support regulation. To Ms. Sue, how do you think vital the role of standards in digital health, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think standards is very important. It is a kind of consent between multiple stakeholders. So that is why we work together with the ministries of ICTs, ministries, health commissions of health, national commissions of health, and also learn from how the engineers, they develop the AI algorithms, and also try to control the bias when you develop, design, and also you registered your license, and also the post market of your health AI-based medical device. So it is a kind of discussions or consent between multiple stakeholders, and this kind of discussion process itself has their significance in developing the industry sustainable development. Over. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Xu. And you already ensure how very vital and how important is the standards in digital health, especially the collaboration between stakeholders and also private sectors. And with that said, then we're going to go to Mr. Scott Colburn. How do standards then help or hinder the implementation of health objectives then? Mr. Colburn?
Yeah, thank you. The use of standards enhances regulatory science and promotes a least burdensome approach to device oversight, which is a key goal for FDA. Standards introduce efficiencies into pre-market review processes by setting clear expectations for conformity assessment and test reporting. Using declarations of conformity and quality conformity assessment reports can increase predictability, streamline pre-market review, provide clear regulatory expectations, and facilitate market entry. Second, consensus standards promote quality. Crowdsourcing standards leads to a clear performance expectations. Relying upon input from around the world ensures that we tap into expertise that no one manufacturer, regulator, or clinician will have access to. Robust standards development yields standards that can keep up with technological advancements, which is so critical in our industry. And finally, using standards helps ensure that innovative, safe, and effective devices and health technologies are available. And by optimizing that bench to bedside time, we get life-saving products to the patients we all serve. We work on this through our means at FDA by recognizing standards and allowing their use to be a voluntary means, but we find that they are used as a means to really communicate to regulators and are seen as a primary mechanism to lower burden in getting into the regulatory processes and making sure they can get into the market in the most efficient time possible. We see use of standards as such an enormously important tool that we share this approach with regulators from around the world in our activities with the IMDRF, the Global Harmonization Working Party, and in how we engage in standards development. We sit in over 600 different committees and working groups across over 36 standard developing organizations because we see how that value lowers our burden in what we do and helps us keep up with trying to help drive safer technologies for the patients that we serve.
Thank you, Mr. Colburn. Now, from what you've said before, that it really enhances the value of regulators with standards itself. Now, my next question is to Mr. Ahmad Sharif. Then, how can regulators leverage the standards? And with that said, what are the benefits that standards bring to our regulators or to the regulators itself, Mr. Sharif?
Yeah. Standards are basically voluntary. So in order to make it as a mandatory requirements, the government, regulators are adopting the standards as a requirement to comply, to show that a medical device is safe and perform as intended. As we know, the hierarchy of standards can be from international to local standards and then to industrial standard. And the highest hierarchy is the international standard. So by adapting the standards for in our regulations, it will help to remove the trade barriers, to support regulatory convergence at the international level, and avoid the emergence of protectionist measures. So it will help the regulators to conduct conformity assessment to ensure that the medical devices are safe and perform as intended. And then by using international standards, it will help remove trade barriers and easy access of the medical devices by in in the global market.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sharif. Again, it was said before by Mr. Colburn that standards itself will give not only value but also confidence by the consumers and civil society itself. Now, back to you, Mr. Colburn. In your introduction, you were saying that standards to harmonize regulations and promote a least burdensome approach. Can you share with us any case examples on this?
Yes, there's a number of real core examples that we look at, and one is even just utilizing one of our basic principle standards in ISO 1345, which is the quality system in the medical device area. This is a standard that's widely used around the world, and our own quality system regulation was written in parallel to this area. We are actually transitioning from our official rule that has been in there for many years to looking at adopting this ISO standard because it aligns so closely to how we do our work today. And in fact, it also will help us work in the international harmonization. The principle underneath that standard is how we assess risk as a public health agency, and looking at how risk and harm and aspects can be mitigated through thoughtful standards development. And the use of ISO 14971, as mentioned earlier in our keynote, is one of those bedrock principles that helps communicate across all the different areas that standards rely heavily upon risk mitigation tactics to be able to communicate to regulators how their devices are safe and effective. There are many areas in it that we utilize standards. As I mentioned earlier, we are involved in hundreds and hundreds of standards committees, and we have a recognition program that it communicates to our stakeholders what types of standards do we feel meet the needs that we have for where we have oversight and pre-market review. And those are tools that allow the communication from the testing houses and conformity assessment bodies when they work with their manufacturers to demonstrate to the regulatory authority on how they are meeting the basic principles that we are looking for in safety and effectiveness. Internationally, we have worked with organizations like the International Medical Device Regulators Forum, who has developed the essential principles of safety and performance, and it outlines the high-level principles that deal with what we care about globally as regulators in assessing the safety and performance of devices, and points to how standards can fit in to meet certain of the essential principles that are outlined in that document. And this is one of the drivers that we're trying to do as a participant in standards, to try to map standards to meet those high-level essential principles in hopes of being able to drive more regulatory convergence from a global setting.
Thank you very much, Mr. Colburn, on that. And what we do need is cross-sectoral collaboration for us, especially for the international standardization in the health department itself. Now, with that said, we'd like to go to Mr. Peter Williams then. Health standards, Mr. Williams, how different it is than general standards? And are there areas for synergy, such as the use of AI?
Yeah, look, I think the more important question is not how they differ, but whether they should. One of the decisions made by the ISO task force on standards for AI was that our starting point is always, is health different? Is there actually a need for a new standard? And this is important for two reasons. Fundamentally, as a number of people have referenced before, modern healthcare operates as part of a very broad ecosystem that has close interaction not only with a very wide range of human and social services, but also with even broader aspects such as climatic conditions. So creating different standards unnecessarily is only going to create barriers to progress. Secondly, and probably more pragmatically, given the pace of development and the use of AI in healthcare, there's a need for speed to market with standards. So we don't want to be wasting time on revisiting foundational concepts that have already been looked at in depth, and we want to ensure that our focus is on the areas of greatest need. Even with this approach, there is a risk that as more specialised standards are being developed, say at the application level, they may identify gaps in some of those foundational or common concepts. That risk is certainly understood, and we have been looking at processes to manage such issues, for example, including interim requirements in annexures rather than the body of standards, so there's the opportunity to revise. A really important development at the macro level is that there's been agreement to form a joint working group between the ISO TC 215 task force and the ISO IEC Joint Technical Committee SC42, which is the Committee on Artificial Intelligence, looking at this more broadly. And I think that will help that alignment between the horizontal and vertical requirement.
Thank you very much, Mr. William. Now, back to you, Ms. Xu. Cross-sector collaboration is needed in standardization. Then how we bridge the gap between health and ICT at both the global and also national levels then?
Thank you for the question. I think I have put some of our experience in my slides. I think from the national perspective, it is important to form the consensus between different kinds of the policymakers. For example, in some also for countries, there is a Ministry for ICTs and the Ministry for Health. And during this standardization, during this digitalization areas, it is important to acknowledge the potential of ICTs or digital technologies that they can improve healthcare delivery or promote the universal health coverage. So to recognize that kinds of value, it is important, and then it forms the motivation to build the partnership between different kinds of multiple stakeholders, for example, from ICTs and then to health. If we do not share the same value or burning point, sometimes you will find different partners, they actually talking sometimes like talking different kinds of language, they can't communicate. So based on that perspective, so I think the kind of sharing value and the blueprint, it is very important. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Xu. Our next round of questions in cooperation at the international level, and I think this is Mr. Peter Williams' forte, as you're involved in the International Medical Device Forum, IMDF. How are the regulators working together with the standardization community, if you can share with us, Mr. Williams?
Yeah, look, one of the reasons for an increasing focus on engagement by the International Medical Device Regulators Forum with standards bodies has been the growing focus by the IMDRF on software as a medical device, on software in a medical device, and digital therapeutics. And in particular, the use by those technologies of artificial intelligence. And, you know, that's a substantial challenge for governments, with hundreds of thousands of healthcare apps, you know, now available globally. So the IMDRF has been working very closely with the standards bodies and industry. At the recent International Forum held in Australia in September, there were presentations from many national delegations, industry bodies, and standards organisations, including the ISO TC 215 task force. One of the largest challenges for standards organisation is how to develop new standards in a timely way, given the need for international consensus that was just referred to. A specific request of Task Force 5 is to work on the development of a management system standard for organisations involved in certifying their AI application lifestyle and supply chain to foster good practices, safe and effective products, and support regulators. That's going to be a significant piece of work, and there's likely be a need to establish some lower level consensus documents to provide interim guidance in the meantime. And I think it's incumbent on us to look at ways of working that will accelerate the understanding of both regulators and standard bodies and that collaboration between them in dealing with such a rapidly evolving space as artificial intelligence in particular.
Then in your opinion, Mr. William, how can regulators work together efficiently on international level to support the global health initiatives? We're still with you, Mr. Williams, on this.
Well, I think some of the things that I've already referred to in terms of the collaboration that is happening across all of the standards bodies in particular, and the recognition of the interrelationship between the activities of the device manufacturers, the software developers, and government is probably at its most prominent that's been for some time. And I noticed that Scott has his hand up. You might want to comment on this.
Thank you very much.
Peter.
Go ahead, Mr. Scalburn.
Yeah, if you don't mind, thank you. I really appreciate what Peter is bringing up about organizations like IMDRF and also with GHWP, who recently made strong efforts to engage with the international standards organizations and are creating liaisonship roles through the opportunities that are outlined in the ISO-IC directives, for example. The key aspect of what we're trying to do here is twofold. One is to try to coordinate a global regulatory voice that would help drive global purposes based upon common thinking tactics across broad areas of the economy that are engaged in this type of activity. But just as important, and maybe even more important, we're really trying to get individual regulatory bodies to be able to participate in their national bodies and national committees, because it's so critical for them to communicate to their country's standard developing organizations. So that way, at the international table, where resources are typically thin for certain bodies, especially regulators, where they may not be able to be present, their vote and communication through their national bodies and committees will be present through that activity and can be carried through by the experts that sit at that table. This is something that we think is just as strong as developing that global voice through the IMDRF liaison program, because then we're ensuring that we're working through the national bodies and in understanding where there could be potential differences in how a standard would impact other types of regulations, and where we can work to truly globalize the approach to get that one test worldwide approach answer that we've always been seeking for in how we use standards.
Thank you, Mr. Colburn. Is there any responses from other speakers in regards to the regulators working together or collaborating international level? Mr. Sharif, Ms. Ju, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you. So I just would like to echo Mr. Peter and Scott have said, and I totally agree with that. Regulators should sit on the table and to talk about the international standardizations. And I would like to add to ask attention from the ITU new work item that is based on the AI and machine learning based on decision-making assistant software as a medical device. So it is another kind of collaboration between China national national regulators and the ITU, and we are working on that kind of standards to deal with kinds of bias or risk management when developers design the AI and machine learning based for health or clinicals, especially how you manage the risk management during the total life cycle of the AI algorithm. And it is now closely worked with ITU. And I would like to echo what Peter and Scott has said. I think probably this kind of global standardization bodies can work as a vendor or to gather different kinds of a voice from the national regulators, and then we sit on the table of the, for example, the IMDRF working mechanisms, and to generate some experience sharings or generate knowledge that can be set as a tangible development that can benefit the global industry. Over. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Xu. And just like what we're having today with the summit itself, hopefully, through the discussion that we have, there are some initiatives and also finding a solution that we can implement to the call to action itself. Now, head to you, Mr. Sharif, on adopting testing and certification. On this round, how do we move beyond standards then to ensure testing and then following to certification, Mr. Sharif?
Oh, okay. WHO has published new guidance on good reliance practice, which provides guidance and recommendations for agile medical device regulations. So the purpose of this guidance is to promote a more efficient approach to regulation, thereby improving access to quality assured, effective and safe medical products. And in the documents, it is recommended that the degree of reliance via this good reliance practice include the standardization process, work sharing, a bridge process, regional reliance mechanism, unilateral, and as well as mutual recognition. So for example, for the regulatory reliance, such as a bridge process for conformity assessment via testing and certification, where an applicant or the industry who is applying for registration or market access of their devices, they only required to undergo verification process. This is especially for Malaysia. So we recognize the conformity assessment that have been done by countries like US, Japan, Australia, Canada, and also EU. This has reduced redundant procedure and time consuming as well as fast patient access. The reason of adopting this kind of verification process is we think that everything have already been done by the recognized regulators, and by doing that, we have reduced a lot of redundant procedures that we need to redo the conformity assessment again.
Thank you, Mr. Sharif. And in regards on conformity assessment, I think this is also one of your forte, Mr. Colburn. Can you share with us your experience with this assessment, and how do we bring conformity assessments into regulation?
Yeah, that's a great question, and really a very broad area too. FDA has, a long-standing history of relying on standards, and through a manufacturer's self-declaration of conformity, that attestation has been utilized to help us then have that communication of how they've gone about in utilizing standards. But over the years, we have also learned to appreciate the conformity assessment system that exists, and how accreditation bodies work with conformity assessment bodies that do certification and testing that was mentioned earlier, to ISO/IEC 17025 and ISO 15189, which are critical components for regulators to understand. Because behind the backdrop of conformity assessment, for regulators to truly accept it and want to adopt it and begin sharing the ability to utilize that one test worldwide approach, is to have confidence in the competence of testing. And that requires us to understand what goes into an accreditation of a testing laboratory. What are those specifications that are utilized for standards like the 60601 series and IEC, which has a massive component in their IEC-EE with the CB scheme and several other areas, but it is a vastly broad standard that requires a lot of different areas of expertise in order to assess competence of a lab. Similarly, like in areas of biocompatibility, where the needs for toxicologists and to be able to assess how laboratories do this kind of work is important to regulators, so that way they can feel confident that the test reports that they're receiving are of the highest quality, and allow the manufacturer to be able to demonstrate that conformity to the standards that they're using to demonstrate the safety and effectiveness of a medical product. It's also critical for us to understand how testing laboratories and manufacturers work together in developing their test plan, into ensuring that they actually understand how to utilize that standard as designed, and how we have been trying to communicate it as regulators in the intent to help demonstrate that safety and effectiveness aspects, those key principles of safety and performance of a medical device. Building that all together, I believe, requires regulators to get engaged a little bit more with the conformity assessment system and help us communicate. We've begun doing that as a pilot at FDA under our accreditation scheme for conformity assessment, and it has opened up great doors for us to appreciate both the rigor as well as the areas for possible improvement to help drive harmonization and reduce the burden that regulatory processes can bring. But I do believe that there is an answer in us getting more involved to help reduce those burdens for us and to help bring products into the market quicker.
Thank you, Mr. Colburn. I see that Ms. Chu is actually very engaging with your answer. Any responses for you in regards to this matter, Ms. Chu?
Thank you, Ms. Chair. So I just have the same feeling with Mr. Scott Colburn, because we are also working on how to facilitate the manufacturing to fasten the process of the go-to-market. And we are also thinking to develop some standards that help them to quality assessment when doing their AI-based software as a medical device. And we are trying, there's some experience from our efforts that we are trying to launch an innovation. Actually, we have already launched an innovation challenge for this kind of product. And then we, during that kind of evaluation or scoring, then we select the topper performance and to fascinate to accelerate their process. And this is point one. And then point two is that we engage that kinds of private sectors to develop or to collect their suggestions on this kinds of process, especially the post-market process, the monitoring and the evaluation. What kind of metrics should be monitored and to ensure the safety and reliance. So I think that is a very interesting and important field. Probably it's not that mature, but it was us to work together and explore a bit to help the sustainable development of this industry. Over.
Thank you very much, Ms. Chu, for your answer. Now we're moving on towards sustainability on this health sector, and that's why we're going to head over to Mr. Sharif. Of course, as we envision more circular economies, can we then consider the use of refurbished medical equipment, and how can we standard promote of their safety? What's your take on this, Mr. Sharif?
Okay. I think the first thing that we should understand that on the definition of refurbished medical device. Refurbished medical device means a medical device of which the whole or any part thereof has been rebuilt. Whether or not using parts, one or more used medical devices of that same kind, so as to create a medical device that can be used for the purpose originally intended by the product owner, and which may have had the following work carried out on it. First, stripping into component parts or sub-assemblies. Second, checking their suitability for reuse. Third, replacement of components or sub-assemblies that are not suitable for reuse. Fourth, assembly of the reclaim and or replacement of component or sub-assemblies. Fifth, testing of the assembled device against either original or revised release criteria. And the sixth, identifying an assembled medical device as a refurbished medical device. Yes, I think we can consider the use of refurbished equipment with certain conditions. The first condition is the refurbishment activities activities shall be included in the scope of the quality management system of the production of the medical device. And then the refurbishment activities shall comply with good refurbishment practice of medical device, or GRPMD, which set a standard operating procedure and dedicated quality requirements that ensure refurbished medical device is safe and effective as when it was new. And the third condition is the medical device shall undergo conformity assessment again. And then fourth, the technical details for the refurbished medical device shall be provided, and the medical device, the refurbished medical device shall be indicated. For example, like it is refurbished. In terms of safety, basic requirement for refurbished medical device is to have the quality management system QMS ISO 13485 and risk management standard ISO 14971. Then the refurbished medical device shall be refurbished according to GRPMD, which is intended to meet its original quality, performance, and safety standards based on ISO 13485. And then safety performance must be evaluated according to the essential principle of safety and performance for a specific refurbished medical device, and they should establish maintenance of a refurbished medical device. For example, in Malaysia, we have the standards for the maintenance of medical device, that is the MS 2058 Code of Practice for good engineering maintenance management of active medical devices. Okay.
Thank you then, Mr. Sharif, and hopefully with this, considering refurbished medical equipment can be proceeded, because we know, especially during the pandemic itself, medical waste has been the majority waste in our planet. Hence, that's why if we can regulate the standardization on this refurbished medical equipment, it could really do help the environment itself. Now, ladies and gentlemen, thank you to our speakers. It was a great and very enlightening discussion that we had, but now we're going to ask our delegates that's right here in person in Bali, and also that is joining us virtually. If you have any further questions to our panel of speakers, please do raise your hand if you're right here. Yes, sir. And also virtually, please do put your questions on the column chat. Yes, so can you please stand up, sir? And, oh, then you can sit down. Sorry. Yes, just mention your name and also the questions.
My name is Ferdi Beer from the Netherlands. I'm a member of the Royal Netherlands Economic Mission during March the 9th, 2020. And now I'm still here in Indonesia to help the locals here in Indonesia, with Indonesia Maju, Indonesia Onward. My question is, this is a question from a volunteer, a Dutch online volunteer, Christian volunteer in Indonesia, in Indonesian local community, who loves the Pancasila, which is rule number 1 very, very much. And the question is, the Indonesian President Joko Widodo and Vice President Maruf Amin want to introduce the world with Indonesian Islamic halal products. For example, cosmetics and high-tech products like your G5 refrigerator in the future, or medical high-tech products. So what is the role of fair trade and sustainable international standards certificates and the halal certificate here in Indonesia and soon worldwide? I hope you can give a clear answer on behalf of Indonesia Onward, Indonesia Maju, as Menteri, Minister, or the boss here of this community. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. your question, and regardless, thank you very much for standing up for that. We wish that Dr. Lucia is here to actually really answer the questions, and it was such a great question too. But regards in halal certifications and whatnot, maybe Mr. Sharif, as we have the somewhat similar governance, maybe you can help to answer the question.
In Malaysia, yes, we have halal certification for medical device, but it is voluntary in nature. So to register a medical device in Malaysia, you need to comply with the requirements of our medical device regulations. But halal is another step that you have to undergo. That is you have to undergo the halal certification. But it is voluntary. It is not a mandatory. Anybody, any manufacturers or any owners of a medical device who have got their certification that have got their product, their medical device registered with MDA, with Medical Device Authority of Malaysia, they can market their product anywhere in Malaysia. But for halal certification, I think their aim is more for those people who really require the halal, require the product to be halal, to be inserted or to be used on them. So these are the only, I think they are going to that kind of consumers. But in general, it is not a mandatory requirement. It is just voluntary. So if you want to opt for halal certification, you can do that. But if you don't need that halal certification, you still can market your product in Malaysia freely. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sharif, for highlighting how the certification is in Malaysia. And also this question is very in regards to the regulation here in Indonesia. With that said, we would like to also ask the help to answer with Mr. Kuku S. Ahmad, our chairman of BSN, to answer this question. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much for the question. So thank you, moderator. So actually the one which has to answer your question is the Agency for Halal Product Assurance within Ministry of Religion Affairs here. But in the fact that we are working hand in hand with them to make the halal certification scheme in Indonesia is running. So starting in the year of 2014, halal has now become mandatory in Indonesia through the law number 33, the year 2014. And it used to be only one halal certification body that been granted to certify halal. But since the establishment of the new law, so the law mandated to us to give to any of, I would say something like halal certification body, which is accredited by our Ministry of Religion Affairs through the Agency for Halal Product Assurance. And if we talk about the requirements of the standard, so I think the requirements for the competence of the certification body itself, we are using the ISO standard, Mr. Sergio. So ISO IC 17065, if you are familiar with. And also for the halal requirement itself, we are using now the technical requirements, which is published by the Ministry of Religion Affairs. But currently we are in discussion with them, because in the future the requirements hopefully will be adopted as SNI or Indonesian National Standard. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kuku S. Ahmad, and hopefully that would elaborate more on your answer, sir. Now we have time for one more question, maybe from virtually, if I can check if there is any question coming in, or maybe also from Maybe from the speakers, is there any other responses to one of the questions here? Not yet. All right. Do you have any more questions from the floor? All right, we'll be waiting for another more minutes for delegates, probably from virtually. We're going to give them also the time for them to ask questions. Maybe this is also to our speakers in regards to health sectors. We know that, especially in developing countries, you've already mentioned a lot of health initiatives and collaborations, especially with technologies. But there are many countries, especially developing countries, where parts of the rural areas in their country, they can't even, get any health benefits or health help. So how can, our initiative, especially in technologies and maybe in the help of AI, could really, made everything just seamlessly put together for health, health services and also health sectors to be, consumed by all the civil society, especially in developing countries. Maybe we can have Mr. Peter Williams on this first.
Yes, look, one of the things, as I mentioned, I work with Oracle. One of the areas where we did work with the vaccine solution, working with the Tony Blair Institute, was in Senegal and Rwanda. In both those cases, they had large areas of the country that, in fact, had no access to the internet or no capability for doing that. And for us to be able to deploy the vaccine solution, which fundamentally relied on technology, we had to build an edge computing solution, which we could do, and that could be done remotely and then reconnected. Probably the largest challenge in that was making sure that in doing that, we didn't breach the requirements around privacy and security, because we were actually then having a device which you wouldn't traditionally hold personally identifiable information on. So I do think, one of the challenges, and certainly in ISO, in all of the standards developments, one of the focus is on developing in mid-level economies and making sure that the solutions that we come up with are applicable across, all of those environments, and not just focused on, I guess, the high-tech end of the solution, but have the widest possible practical applicability.
Correct. Health access and health availability, and if we can enhance that, ensure that we are still right now in the pandemic, and if we can have that, I think we can really recover together and recover stronger, as our theme of the G20 presidency itself. Can we have your take on this, Mr. Colburn?
Yes, I would like to break this down in a very simple fashion, and I think this could be a call to action to our leadership at ISO, ICITU, and all the members here in the G20 that, participation, as I mentioned earlier, is very critical, but we know that resources can be very, very, very thin. Also, communicating to the technical committees and the leadership that manage those committees on areas that we could do to improve this would help drive experts that are specifically trying to address areas in these technical areas and make those connections, and maybe even bring themselves to be able to hold meetings in the areas where these people could participate in person better. Being involved is such a critical aspect to be able to understand how to take standards and build them into that conformity assessment model that can bring technologies to the market in their area in the most efficient, least burdensome, and cost-effective ways possible. And participation is always that sore spot that we find, but there are ways now, especially in the ability for me to call you from Washington, D.C. and be in Bali tonight or in your morning. There are ways that we can do this in more economical ways. And so that is such a powerful message on all stakeholders to get involved in ways. And I think the leadership that we have in our international standards groups can work with the leaderships that are appointed in each of those technical committees And I've seen examples of this in the past, like in areas for devices for injectables and ISO TC84, where they have coordinated to bring in leadership from Africa, for example, who had an identified need to bring devices to help supply their nations in that area. And we had great outcomes and ended up developing better standards that met the needs that could be done in broader areas. So key message is find ways to get people to participate.
All right, thank you for that, and thank you for that energy right there, Mr. Colburn. Now, because we are very limited in time of this first session, we have other sessions that we have to undergo. Maybe to our speakers, last remarks on this, and we start from Ms. Chin Yu.
Thank you. I just would like add a short comments on your previous question. So regarding to the developing areas or countries, sometimes we think AI is a very high-tech thing. We think they are very complicated, but from our experience, AI has a great potential to help the rural poor areas, because AI can learn from the top performance and expertise, and then they use their technologies or knowledge to help to deploy it in the rural area. That is point one. But point two is that I would like to call the conscious when you use AI, because if you only learn from the top areas, they will have data bias or model bias. So when you deploy it in the rural area, be cautious about that bias. That is point two. And point three is that regarding to the bias and the ITU and WHO AI for Health focus group, that we are going to committed to build a benchmark system that to deal with that kind of bias, model bias or data bias. So we would like to set it as a baseline to evaluate if that kinds of AI models can work safely or in a required way, in a reliable way. So that is our efforts regarding to what you have mentioned, the rural area or developing countries.
Correct.
Over.
Yes. Thank you very much on that, Mr. Shansu, and hopefully you will have, we'll have a collaboration not only between governments but also private sectors and stakeholders itself on your initiative on that. Again, maybe a last remarks before we conclude our first session, Ms. Shansu.
I think I just would like to thank you for inviting me in that a great discussion or panel, and I'm looking forward to more collaboration. That is over. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shansu, Ms. Shansu, excuse me. And now to Mr. Ahmad Sharif, your last remarks for the session.
I think capacity building and work sharing at the international level is very crucial in this to address any requirements to develop any standards on medical devices, be it the traditional medical devices or the current emerging medical technologies. So I think the regulators as well as the users and the stakeholders for medical devices need to be exposed, they need to be, their capacity need to be built so that everybody understand the safety and performance standard and use the medical device according to what it is intended for. Okay, and I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to be part of this panelists in this forum. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your participation, Mr. Ahmad Sharif. Now to Mr. Peter Williams, your last remarks, sir.
Yes, again, thank you for the opportunity to participate. I'd just really like to reinforce the comments that Scott made regarding participation from lower and middle income economies in this. I think it's really an important aspect in making sure that not only that our systems are applicable more widely, but also that we tap into the innovation that is in many cases coming from those communities.
Thank you very much, Mr. Peter Williams. And last but never the least, Mr. Scott Colburn.
I couldn't probably say it better than all the members of the esteemed panel, but I want to thank, Indonesia as the host and all the leadership there. As everyone mentioned, and I think as you can see, no matter where we come from or who we represent, we have a common goal in trying to develop stronger standards to improve the health of our public and and patients and drive technologies. And I think when we work in better standards development and see how they can be incorporated by regulators and then use a very strong conformity assessment system, when we all come together as stakeholders to that, we can bring data that can measure the impact of standards. And that's a key aspect, I think, for us to continue to improve standards, to measure the outcomes that we're trying to do in this ever-driving technological industry. But if we want to keep building confidence, that data and how it measures the impact will help drive the next generation of standards and the continual improvements that we'll have together and be able to accomplish these goals. So again, thank you for the opportunity. I look forward to continue to working with all of our colleagues and friends in the standards world. And I wish you all a good day and evening and look forward to seeing you again in the future.
Thank you very much, Mr. Colburn. What a great to end the note for the first session of the G20 International Standards Summit 2022. Can we have a round of applause, please, for our speakers? We'd like to thank you, Mr. Scott Colburn, Mr. Ahmad Sharif, Mr. Peter Williams, and Ms. Shansu from and Dr. Andalusia, Rizka Andalusia as our keynote speaker for our first session. And again, if you have, or we're going to compile any questions, if you have further questions in regards of health sector and the standard, and for the standardization, we'll compile your questions and then we'll give your question respectively to the speakers. Now, without further ado, delegates and also participants, whether you're right here in Bali and also virtually, we're coming into the second session of the summit with the theme Accelerating Digital Transformation. The objective of the session is we'll examine how international standards can promote digital transformation across many industries, sectors, and cities with enable a circular, inclusive, and people-centric approach that empowers everyone, regardless of gender, age, ability, to benefit equally and equitably from new technologies. For this session, we already have our keynote speaker that will be sharing with you his presentation, Ian Opperman, Chief Data Scientist from New South Wales Government, in which Mr. Opperman himself will be leading for this session. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ian Opperman.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. Thank you very much for having me here today. It is a real pleasure. And I wanted to start the session by talking about why we should care about digital transformation. And it really comes down to the fact that the world is changing around us, and we know the world is changing around us. Industry is changing. The industries that we serve are changing. Electrification, digitization, personalization are changing every aspect of every industry around us. Who would have thought that just 10 years ago that the top 10 companies globally by market capitalization would not be oil companies or natural resources companies or even banks, but companies that develop software or companies that use data to drive real value. If you look at the top 10 companies globally, many of them, in fact, the list is dominated by companies like Microsoft, companies like Amazon, but also the electrification of the world around us we see in companies like Tesla in the top 10 companies in the world. And again, 10 years ago, if we were sitting here in 2012, we would not think the world would look like that. We also, of course, know that the world's population is changing. We will hit, for the first time ever, as human beings, 8 billion people on the planet this year. For the first time in our history, 8 billion people. And the projections, of course, keep going up until the end of the century. It's still subject to many assumptions, still subject to a whole lot of global shocks. But by 2030, when we're talking about the UN Sustainable Development Goals, we're talking another 500 million people, another 500 million people on the planet. 8.5 billion people population. And that's with no more land, no more water, no more natural resources. We have what we have, but an extra 500 million people on the planet who, of course, expect an improved quality of life compared to what we have today. Everybody continually expects that we improve our quality of life. And that's in the context of a changing climate. It's in the context of a changing environment. And of course, it does not stop there. By 2050, we're expecting 9.7 billion people. And by the end of the century, 11+ billion people. And if you think about a child who's born here in Indonesia today, almost every single one of those children will make it to the 22nd century, will make it to the end of this century. And that's how we get that extra 3 billion people on the planet. No more land, no more water, no more natural resources. We have what we have. And in the context of a changing climate, with this population that's growing, living longer, and living to be much older, we have a challenge of sustainable intensification. How can we keep increasing the population in an environment where we grow food, where we draw calories, where we draw sustenance from the planet is also changing. The challenge is sustainable intensification. Now, we talk about the UN Sustainable Development Goals, a great example of what we want the world to look like by 2030. We also know the goals have been in place since 2015. So we've had them, we've adopted them for 7 years, and we have about 7 years to go. And we also know that we run a very great risk of missing the goals for every single one of them. So what we are doing has to change. The way we are doing it has to change. The one resource that we have, which is in abundant supply, is of course renewable energy. But there's another resource that we have in abundant supply, and that's data or digital and technologies. And increasingly, how we respond to that challenge of sustainable intensification is going to need to draw on data, digital technologies, and also renewable energy. The way we think about an aging population will need to change. The way we think about the circular economy will need to change. But to give you a sense of the scale of the challenge we're looking at, I looked at the cost of the moon landing project, the Apollo project in the US in the 60s, very famous, transformed the way we as people think about our place in the solar system, think about our place in the universe. The cost of that program at the time was approximately $25 billion. In today's terms, that's about $250 billion, a very significant undertaking, but a relatively small proportion of the world's total production, the GDP of the US, the global production of the entire world. The estimate to get to net zero is measured in hundreds of trillions of dollars. 1,000 times more significant effort than the effort that helped us change the way we think about the world, change the way we think about ourselves. If we talk about something that we must do, if we talk about achieving sustainability, if we talk about gigaton decarbonisation, where we lock away carbon for geological timeframes, we need to invest a very, very serious amount in technology and in new ways of doing things. And if we do it the way we're doing things at the moment, we also run the risk of missing the target and expending a great deal of time, money, and effort doing it. So the case for change is not something which is important to do. Embracing the case for change is not something that's important for us to get serious about or to put more effort into. The case for change is essential, absolutely essential, if we are to meet the challenges of 2030, of 2050, and to meet the challenges for those children born today who are living through to the end of this century. So our session today is about transformation and innovation in transformation. And part of the reason for framing the conversation in such stark terms is to point out that innovation is not an optional thing. But innovation is hard, transformation is harder. And when we think about the need for the entire planet to transform, that's the biggest challenge that we have. That's a very difficult challenge. Different economies are, of course, at different stages of development. Different economies are at different levels of their own maturity in terms of use of data and digital, in use of AI, and in their own challenges locally and their own challenges in their own geographic context. But it's something that we really do need to collaborate on. And there are very few mechanisms that we genuinely collaborate through which have an impact on the real world. Standards is one of them. Standards is a genuinely global cooperative effort where we genuinely globally work together to produce practical, implementable, purposeful solutions that help us address the challenges not only of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, but of the challenges of an ageing society, the challenges of changing climate, the challenge of sustainable intensification. So today we're going to hear from some very distinguished speakers who are going to help us think through the challenges of the role of standards, how they promote digital transformation across many industries, and how we can work together to help deliver on the goals that we have stated, that we will deliver on, and to speak to the challenges that we have. We're joined today by Ilham Habibie, Mr. Ilham Habibie, who's the chair of the National ICT Council for Indonesia. We're joined by Vitasari Renee, who is the Deputy Director of Policy for Southeast Asia Women's World Banking. We're joined by Val Diab, who is the chair of JTC1's SC42, which is artificial intelligence, and of course JTC1 is the collaborative activity between ISO and IEC. And we're joined by Armin Orujaya, who is the Orujand, who is the founding CEO at the Foundation for Armenian Science and Technology, who's joining us virtually. So I'd like to invite Mr. Ilham Habibie, who is the chair of the National ICT Council of Indonesia, to come and join me on the stage and to give a short opening statement. Please welcome Mr. Habibie. Are you ready for your opening statement?
Is it a statement or a presentation?
Presentation.
Presentation. Okay, I'm ready for the presentation. Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Ian Opperman, for the kind introduction. My name is Ilham Habibie. I'm the head of the National ICT Council, which is a government advisory agency. And our job is actually, one of them is to help the government for digital transformation. So this is really at the core of what we do. Can I have my slides? Okay, I think you have them just behind me. So just as an intro, can I have the first slide, please? Or the second, actually? Yeah, this is just to show what the structure looks like. I think the real interesting thing is that at the executive level, that's the part of the One Tiknas organization that I'm leading, we are truly cross-sector, meaning we have participation from people from the government, of course, also people from the business sector like myself, from academia, and also from civil society organizations, including professional organizations like the Chamber of Commerce and Industry. On the so-called steering committee level, it's all government headed by the president himself and a few ministers of his cabinet. The third slide shows you the task that we are supposed to perform. Can I have the next, please? First, just focus on the blue of the four tasks that you see in the upper part of the slides of what we are supposed to help formulating general policy, then resolve existing strategic issues, conduct national coordination that includes also national from central to regional governments. Indonesia is subdivided into many provinces and again subdivided into many sub-provinces, so-called regencies, and all of them, or not all, but some of them have their own regional ICT councils. And so we go with them or with regional-owned entities like companies, etc. Then you see on the lower part of the slide that, yes, indeed, the digital transformation is core of what we are supposed to help. Then on the next slide, very briefly, can I have the next? This is basically the President's directive regarding the National Digital Transformation Agenda. There's a lot of things that are written here, but I think main point regarding ICT is that We are supposed to integrate data, which is not an easy task to do. There's a lot of ego-sectoral behavior of national entities, ministries, and non-ministerial agencies. So because of historical development of ICT in our country, data centers and the management of those has been, by and large, actually by the government entities themselves, without looking at the integration of the data. And that is actually a big obstacle to really transform, because we have, contradicting data sometimes. It depends on the data definition and when they were updated, et cetera, et cetera. Then, of course, human resources is always at the core of transformation. I mean, this is a major challenge that I believe is, we've seen in many countries, not only Indonesia, that if you don't have the appropriate human resources, then it's very hard to do anything, including transformation. Then on the next slide, this is basically just to show you, this is basically what we are wanting to be looking like in 2045. That is when Indonesia defines itself as being already a developed country. What does it mean in economic terms? Right now, we just entered the reign of so-called lower middle income countries, which is around about $4,000 per capita per year. If we want to go into the high developed countries, we have to surpass $12,000 per capita per year. This is not a small undertaking. If you think about the amount of people that we have in Indonesia, right now 275 million people. I think in 2045 we will be well beyond 320 million. Can I have the next? This shows you very briefly how ready we really are. And there are 3 indexes that I refer to here, which are, I think, quite used in the world to show the status of any individual country. We talk about the Global Innovation Index, then Global Talent Competitive Index, and the UNDP Human Development Report. So you can see that Indonesia is sort of mid-range or mid to low. So we still have a lot of homework to do. And I believe personally the main point is, again, the main challenge is not so much technology or infrastructure. It's not easy, but the most difficult part is always the people. Get the people's education and understanding, experience right, and make them talk to one another and agree on things. Can I have the next? Then challenges and issues. Well, typical SWOT analysis, so you can see Indonesia is actually, demographically speaking, quite advantaged vis-a-vis other countries, because we have a very young population. You see 65% digital native, meaning younger than 40 years old, and that generation is, because they're digital native, they get things almost intuitively. They use it on a day-to-day basis, but actually at the same time, they are actually still lacking digital literacy, which is sort of like, at first you think this is contradictory, but it's not, because they are very apt to use digital technology for consumerism. But when it comes to productive issues, and that probably includes also standardization, because you want to use digital technology not only to consume, but you want to produce, you want to increase the competitiveness of your small and medium-sized industries, and we have a lot of those in Indonesia. 99% of all companies in Indonesia are small and medium-sized, and it is a particular challenge to get those companies in the millions. They deliver about 56-57% of GDP. So to get those millions and millions of Indonesians who are working in the small and medium-sized enterprise sector to that level is a major undertaking. So that includes, and before I entered this room, I had a discussion already in the holding room about carving out a particular sector or make the standards easier to adapt for small and medium-sized enterprises. And that is, I think, if you would achieve that in Indonesia, a big part of our challenge, our homework would be actually achieved to transform the country. So transforming Indonesia includes particularly the small and medium-sized enterprises. And that is actually the weakness, the digital literacy. I mentioned another one that is maybe not that obvious, but it is something, no, can I go back to the other slide, please, just very briefly? So you see in the right upper corner, or you saw, there was one sentence written, unclear digital leadership. What does it really mean? Well, we have too many, in my view, too many government entities talking about digital matters. We have a ministry responsible for e-government, another one is a ministry for communication and informatics, They are sometimes saying they are responsible for the infrastructure, but when it comes to e-government, that's not them, etc. And so it's hard sometimes to get everybody on board. And what we wish, or what I wish as a chief executive of One Tiknas or the National ICT Council, that we have something like a chief digital officer that would make the transformation easier. And I've seen, we've made some benchmarks with other countries. Sometimes that kind of a person is a minister, it could be a head of a non-ministerial government agency, or even in the office of the president. All of the above is available in other countries as an example. And it's not, neither one is better or worse than the other, but you just have to appoint a person that is responsible overall. And then it's much easier to decide on things, and that would also make digital transformation easier. So you need a very clear change agent, somebody who's responsible top-down and really resolve issues and resolve conflicts or potential conflicts between various entities. That is very, very important. And the threat is also important here, and I think if you read the media recently, there's more and more focus now coming back to digital divide issues. Because if you imagine that certain parts of our population, for either knowledge or economic reasons, don't have the same access than other parts of digital technology, the ones that have access and can really use it, they can accelerate their development. And so they will be even faster ahead, more ahead than the others that are left behind. So the digital divide would then actually translate immediately into a larger socio-economic gap, and that is, I think, something very challenging, very dangerous. So now the next slide, please. So this is a more academic slide. According to this institution, the pandemic response has been missing like this. You see something immediate, something more like slower, and something long-term. And the renewal is basically something, I think that the transformation is basically a renewal. And so that is something that the very nature of things will need more time because it's so substantial. So the next slide shows you basically what the post-pandemic shifts really look like. So we have here these four categories: customers and challenges, value chains and operations, work and workforce, and lastly, technology and infrastructure. So if I may focus on the technology infrastructure side, what we see right now is basically all goes to cloud. Yeah. Basically, it enables also concepts like as a service. You have basically software as a service. It could be anything. I mean, like financial service as a service, or everything. The commercial model is more by the click rather than you buy a big piece of software that is installed in your computer, but you can access it and you have to pay for it, but very small micropayments whenever you use it. That is more and more transforming actually our digital landscape. Also, the integration of physical and digital assets, that's something which is happening right now. Mr. Opperman mentioned the dominance of the big data companies. Data is the new oil. You mentioned it as well. This is, I think, so-called digital assets are now perceived as, and there are real assets that probably at some point will be noted as such on balance sheets, right? But we haven't really seen that yet. But I think, and the last one is basically the integration of AI or artificial intelligence. So that is something which is very transformative when it comes to anything regarding technology infrastructure in the context of business and operating model shifts. So now to the core. I mean, what about standardization? So the standardization, in my view, is very, very important. Of course, it's pivotal when you talk about shaping digital transformation. It can be seen as a facilitator or as an accelerator. So standards play a very big role in basically supporting digital transformation, particularly after the pandemics. And on the right-hand side of the slide, the pie chart, you see various categories where the standards in digital transformation play a big role. There's something like, I mean, we are all familiar with those: climate action, or you see this is basically SDGs, right? We have the SDGs grouped here in the pie chart manner around the keyword standards and digital transformation. And for all of those SDGs, standards and digital transformation plays a very central role. Next slide, please. So the aspects considered in developing standards are basically, you have to have a strategy, a very robust one. Then collaboration, also mentioned by Mr. Opperman, is very important. Worldwide, because standards should be worldwide. as much as we can in order to make them really useful for everybody. And it should be also cooperation not only worldwide, but also between developers of all types. And by that, we have to also make sure that sustainability is something that is, in today's world, we are so focused on things related to net zero. Of course, sustainability is core. And lastly, standardization should always be guided by the so-called 7 principles, which are trustworthiness, interoperability, safety, security, data privacy, inclusiveness, stability, sustainability, and international collaboration. And by that, we can support the 3P: people, prosperity, and our planet. So, well, as a closing, I think to just summarize, we cannot run away from digital transformation. I think it's inevitable, and I think we probably all agree on that. And at the same time, it really has shown us how we can basically solve many problems when we were still in the pandemic area, and right now I see a mix between people that wear masks and not, so we are probably transitioning out. We're not fully out, but I think most of us have already either experienced it themselves or are fully vaccinated or both. And so the effect of the pandemic is already basically, I wouldn't say over, but we are at the very, very last part. And the readiness of human resource, as already mentioned many times by myself, is key to all of the above. Standards have a prime role to facilitate and accelerate, and collaboration, particularly when it comes to technical cooperation between stakeholders, is something which is very, very important in the context. I think that's it from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bibi. I'd like to now welcome our second panellist up onto the stage, please. Vitasari Anyareni, who's the Deputy Director of Policy, Southeast Asia Women's World Banking. Please join me in welcoming Vitasari. And since you now have the microphone, if you'd like to offer your opening remarks, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Ian. Good morning, distinguished delegates and guests, and distinguished panelists. It's an honor to be here with you. And thank you for the organizer to invite Women's World Banking in this opportunity. It is a privilege for me to be here representing Women's World Banking. So maybe for some of you who are not familiar with Women's World Banking, we are a global NGO. We've established in 1970s, and for more than 40 years, we work to advance women's financial inclusion, which also includes digital financial inclusion. So we work directly with the financial institution across the globe in 35 countries to design products that tap into women's market. We also work with the policymakers across our priority market to design gender lens policy to advance women's financial inclusion. And we also conducting a leadership and diversity training for the leaders in the financial institutions and regulators. So maybe if we can go like a short introduction on the topic that we will discuss here, and in the context of women's digital financial inclusion, in the context of digital transformation. I will start with a question, maybe the next slide. Yeah. So why does financial inclusion matter? In Women's World Banking, we define financial inclusion as having the choice to access financial solutions under her own name, and also capability to make financial decisions towards different life cycle throughout the lives of a woman and men. But why does it matter? Because when women have access to financial inclusion, it improves the lives of women and the lives of those around, while strengthening communities, but also adding opportunities to financial institutions and contribute to the national economies. Next slide, please. Yeah. So when women have access to financial services, which also include digital financial services, not only that women will benefit herself, but also will contribute to the basic investment in health and basic education and in the family. Next. Communities will improve the standard of living. With the many families increase their standard of living, then the numbers of girls participating in secondary education will also increase. And for each additional year of secondary education will lead to 25% increase in the potential earning. Financial institution will gain an untapped commercial opportunity. It is estimated that around $700 billion in additional revenue can be gained by giving equal opportunity for women to access financial inclusion. And the last, eventually the global economy thrive. Next, I think there's, okay. So with women having access to financial inclusion, it can add as much as $28 trillion to global GDP by 2025. And in the context of SDGs, financial inclusion is put as an enabler to push towards achieving SDG goals. But despite all this evidence and all these potentials, next slide please, there are still systemic gaps and discriminatory practice that limits women's participation in social, economy, and financial inclusion. There are so many numbers, impactful numbers here, but I think some of the key things that I would like to highlight here that relevant to our discussion would be that overall it will take around 136 years to close the gender gap worldwide. That's if we keep doing the business as usual without having a women perspective or gender lens perspective. The smartphone ownership gap is at 18%. It could be a small number, but what's discouraging is that this number is only increasing in the past year, even with the pandemic. So with the pandemic access push towards digitalization, digital transformation, but it doesn't address the gender gap. 44% women doesn't have digital ID gap, doesn't have digital ID as compared to men with 28%. Women and girls undertake 3 times unpaid care work compared to men, and it represents a $10.8 trillion contribution to the global economy. I think as we can see from these overall numbers here, that around 190 countries, there are still some economies that limit mobility of women, limit the asset ownership, and also only some mandate equal pay for equal work. So I think I will stop my presentation here as an introduction, and we can discuss in the discussion. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you very much. And could I now invite our last in-person panelist, Val Diab, who is the chair of ISO IEC JTC1 Subcommittee 42, the subcommittee that's working on artificial intelligence. Val, would you please join us on stage?
Thank you, Ian. I'm actually virtual today, not on stage. But happy, but to your point, I mean, we're lucky that we can do this. I wanted to first thank ISO, IEC, ITU, the World Trade Organization, BSN, and of course the G20 for the opportunity to talk about our work. I chair, as Ian mentioned, the International Standards Committee that's joint between ISO and IEC on artificial intelligence. We're scoped to be the focal point for the JTC1 IT program on AI between ISO and IEC, but we also provide guidance in terms of enabling other IEC, ISO, and JTC1 committees to develop AI applications. We have 50 countries that participate. BSN is one of our observing members. We also have over 50 liaisons, internal and external. 250 delegates typically plus attend our sessions with 30 active projects and about 15 published. We also directly support 12 of the 17 UN SDGs and indirectly support all of them through the application of our standards in vertical domains. I did want to share a couple of slides just to give you a little bit more background in terms of what we do. And if I could just quickly confirm that you can see my slides.
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. So we have an approach to look at the entire AI ecosystem, and to one of the points on the previous discussion, That also includes the development of standards that support third-party certification and audit, which is an increasingly important thing. But one thing here that is a little interesting that I believe some of my colleagues on the panel are touched on is the fact that the world is changing. So technology is not only just for technologists. And the way we are developing standards has evolved to address that as well. So at the top of my chart, you can see what I call non-technical trends and requirements. So on the extreme right, we have business problems that we try to solve. And on the extreme left, we look at application domain requirements because we don't want to develop a standard from an IT perspective that's just used in one domain. But what's interesting is we're also looking at emerging societal requirements, things like ethics, data, and so on, as well as regulatory and policy requirements. And we're doing these upfront and concurrently with the development of the technical part of the standards. We look at all of this and then look at what I call the context of use of the technology, which in our case is artificial intelligence, big data, and their application to analytics. We then develop a package of horizontal standards, things like foundational concepts, reference architectures, use cases, and management system standards as an example. But the story does not end there. In the standards world, we work with our sister committees in IEC and ISO to develop domain-specific standards that build on these. Open source communities can use this as well as proprietary implementations. So this is a novel approach to try and look at the whole ecosystem in partnership with other committees and organizations. I also wanted to talk about a comment that Ian made, which is the idea of using technology and the tools available to us. So you may not speak standardese or attend standards meeting for a daytime job, but thanks to all the technology, there are a couple of opportunities for you to join and learn more about what's happening. The first is a conference that IEC puts on called AI with Trust. It's based in Geneva, run in a hybrid fashion in conjunction with the Swiss Federal Department on Foreign Affairs, and has a multi-stakeholder approach. The second is an ISO IEC workshop that we do twice a year, which SC42 facilitates and organizes, and explores everything from the application of AI standards, novel AI standardization approaches, beneficial AI, enabling technology trends and AI requirements. Again, multi-stakeholder, multidisciplinary approach that brings together people from really top people who AI is top of mind, but may come from different perspectives. Here's the information. We'll make this available. We have the upcoming one is at the end of November. You can find the previous information and all the presentations from the last workshop, as well as registering for the new one. And I'm not going to go into the details, but you can see that we've got 4 tracks set up. The first one will be on AI applications, talking about healthcare, looking at beneficial AI, novel standardization approaches, and then finally, emerging AI technology trends and requirements. So with that, thank you very much, and I look forward to the panel discussion.
Thank you very much, Vail. Please join me in thanking Vail. And our last panelist today, who I believe is joining us virtually, is Armin Oyujan, who is the founding CEO at Foundation for Armenian Science and Technology, joining us virtually. Wonderful. Please, Armin, your opening statement.
Okay, good. Hey, I don't know whether it's very late at night where I am, so I don't know what time you have there, but good day, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, organizers, for making this happen. I think this is an important discussion, especially right around the corner when G20 is going to meet. I appreciate the contributions of our panelists. It's a privilege to be with you on this panel. I suppose one aspect of this is how do we really benefit from this digital transformation? And look, all of our panelists and colleagues provided very interesting work that they're doing and important figures and studies and assessments they have done that will help their own organizations, but also through the experiences and expertise of their own organizations for us to be moving forward. In the work that we're doing, I represent the Foundation for Armenian Science and Technology. We look at what type of an ecosystem can we build that will enable scientific advancement and technological innovation, and what is the essence of technology, and what is the requirement for technology to help transform the human and humanity in itself. We like to look at technology as a liberator. If I were to compare it to possibly Greek gods, it would be the Nike, or if Roman gods, it would be Mercury. It is people's wings in a way, right? Provides access to information to a greater population, which until just recent past, and more so actually with COVID, it really helped us to connect better. By that, adding more general intellectual capacity to everyone by bringing people close to one another, thereby enhancing more synaptic connections. So you think of every individual being a neuron, and then you're connecting this neurons through synaptic connections, and that would be, in today's world, that would be the technology. It helps us expand markets. Think of how without technological advancements, they would not have been Amazon or Walmart's growth the year after year would not have been possible if you didn't have these types of technological advancements. The biggest hurdles, I would say, is to be found in education. Not everyone can contribute or benefit from it, especially when we're talking about education by way of national policies. Some nations get to integrate technology too late, thereby contributing to added opportunity costs or lost opportunities, or having strict policies, thereby hindering innovation, entrepreneurship, gender and minority inclusion. So we've looked into all of these, we've been looking at all of these aspects when we're looking at technology, and here's where we look at standardization, how it will become an enabler, because and maybe it could be during the Q&A session, but I think it would be important to also explore how perhaps the incorrect or not well thought through standardization can hinder technological advancement. And I think here the human factor is very important. I heard my colleagues speak about ethics and anything that would be connected with human perception, which is very different in very different parts of the world, and in various ethnic groups and in gender compositions, that may set technology to go in various ways, and at times inadvertently in the wrong way. So looking at this and trying to figure out what type of or what part of technology can help the human make the proper decisions in a way. So we look at number of verticals in AI, and our colleague just spoke a lot about artificial intelligence a minute ago. We look at artificial intelligence a lot. And we know it's no longer knocking on your doors. It actually is here, being used in everything from food production to automotive industry to flying planes, seeding the fields, harvesting crops, identifying diseases, finding medical solutions, even listening to the radio, types of music you like, buying cleaning goods, understanding what types of products you'll be using and have been using, getting into transportation, meeting friends, finding loved ones, monitoring your children's homework. The list is immense. I mean, you can go on and on. And then the next phase of this would be possibly replacing us in the workplace. That's also in the cards. So, we look at AI as solutions that don't get exhausted or take breaks, vacations, sick days, or maternity or paternity leaves. So these are all the possible benefits of this. But if, going back to what I said about education, if people aren't educated to be part of it, or if the government policies don't allow proper integration or deployment, it hinders growth and asset creation in all those areas. So when we talk about, and this is why I find these types of meetings, with what ISO is doing and ITU and what have you, are critical, but also critical for us to understand that human element, when humans get together to establish new policies, new regulations, the bias always exists, and we don't know about this. We generally, we're not aware of the biases that we have. So at times when we bring our even well-intended intentions into new policies, we may inadvertently, just to make the final point, inadvertently create something that would be detrimental to the growth of societies, but also to the growth of which can hinder technological advancement and technological innovation. So I want to stop here. Essentially, the point was, as far as deep technologies and the verticals we're looking into, and integration of AI into all aspects of technological development, when we bring in the human factor, whether we create policies or we follow policies, we just got to be extremely cautious for us not to add layers of bias without even recognizing that we are adding to them. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Armin. Please join me in thanking Armin for his opening statements. Now, we have some questions I'd like to run through, and then I'd like to save some time for audience questions. So we're going to have to be a little bit snappy with our answers, unfortunately. But Ilham, with putting you on notice to be the first respondent, how digital transformation is often described in terms of words like disruption. How can digital transformation actually promote development?
Thanks for the question. Well, first of all, I don't think that it's always disruptive. It can be actually, it depends what the digital transformation does. Let's assume you would basically deliver something to a group of people that have not had that service before. There's disruption, but it's not felt as a disruption, it's actually an immediate enhancement of their lives. I'm talking about what Mrs. Vita was saying. When you deliver financial services to people that have not had any before, it is from the outside seen as a disruption. For them, it's an immediate enhancement of their lives. I mean, in Indonesia, there's an example. Before we had fintechs in Indonesia, there were less than 50% of our population having bank accounts. So they don't have the convenience of having a stability financial in terms of having the ability to transfer money and receiving money. So that is actually also something that addresses your point of development. What is seen from the outside as a disruption, in many cases, if you look at the world of startups, many of those basically focus on areas where you see an immediate need, which has not been fulfilled by the conventional and traditional industry. So there is a transformation happening. It is from the outside seen as something disruptive, but really it disrupts something where before there was not much. Yeah. So it is definitely a positive development in that regard. Yeah.
Great answer, really great response. And I think identifying unmet need and disrupting in that way, I think is just absolutely fantastic. Yeah. Vitasari, I'm going to turn to you. Your work brings women into the financial conversation. And I have to say that number of 135.6 years, my goodness, absolutely amazing. what's the role of digital tools in securing women's well-being as active participants in the future digital economy? And what is the role of digital tools in general for the vision that you see?
Thank you, Ian, for the question. I think aligned with what Pak Ilham also mentioned, that disruption is inevitable as well, and that I think there are, in many countries, are found that when talking about the financial inclusion, when the country has low penetration of bank account, the penetration of mobile money is even higher. So indeed, there are potential there. And out of 2/3 of women who doesn't have access to bank account do own mobile phone. So I think we all agree that there are how digital tools can be beneficial, looking at the potential. However, to ensure that this digital tool really address and really benefit the women, I think there are three points that we advocate in women's world banking. First is to mandate gender disaggregated data, to analyze it and to use it as policy making, as an evidence for policy making, or to design product for financial services. The second is leveraging unsecured loan and addressing the algorithmic gender bias. I think I've heard a lot also in our discussion today that we are addressing algorithmic bias, and in this context, it's also the gender bias in algorithmic. And the third, I think, align with the introduction that from Pak Ilham, that it's not only about infrastructure, but also about the people. And in Women's World Banking, we advocate for digital financial capability. And the word capability is intentional because it is more than digital literacy or financial literacy, but it is beyond. After women have the knowledge, they will also then possess the skill and to be capable to use the digital and financial tools as in their financial decision. So there is an element of behavior change to really ensure that the digital tools can benefit women. I hope that answered.
Fantastic, thank you very much. For those who've ever looked at the UN Sustainable Development Goals, there is a website you can go to which looks at impact pathways and specifically looking at the impact of financial tools on the different Sustainable Development Goals. I thoroughly recommend that to you. Armin, I'm going to throw to you. In your opening remarks, you talked about some of the implications of use of AI. You talked about the need for ethical frameworks. You talked about the unintended consequences. Can you just give us a little more about the challenges of integration of AI in industries and other sectors? What should we be watching out for?
Some of I think our panelists, thanks for the question. Some of our panelists talked about data. Data is a critical component here. I think standardization is vital here for technological progress. I would, more data, homogeneous data, sorted data, protected data, available data. All of this helps tech development. What we're doing, for instance, in Armenia with the government of Armenia, trying to figure out how best can we extract homogeneous data, which is far better than heterogeneous data for specific solutions that you would look at. But how can you extract it, and how can you maintain it and annotize it, and then make it available for purposes of research or integration in various private sector initiatives. Not everyone is going to have access to data. And if you don't have access to data and you go for application or implementation, you may actually get consequences and you may get responses and answers that could be detrimental for the business. It would be without proper data assortment, it would be like blind leading the blind. You would come up with responses from your marketing teams, for instance, driving types of products that you had no intention of bringing to market, or sending it to various other parts of the world where you don't have business, thereby either hurting you in the short run or hurting you in the long run. So integration of some of these solutions into your business need to be very well thought through, and that's number one. Number two, also progressing. So it's just integrating a solution isn't enough. You would want to understand how you're also going to continuously be able to advance it. Many of you again mentioned that there is going to be almost like a technological explosion. Well, this technological explosion can happen if properly scientific advancement between technology happens in proper manner, and people that really understand how to deal with data are the ones who are driving these type of technological advancements in the first place. I would say, overall integration of artificial intelligence in all the verticals, anything from agri-tech to fintech to ed-tech, even fashion tech, are positive, as long as the AI, the artificial intelligence technology itself is properly understood and the data that is supporting is properly collected and properly maintained and properly made available for both engineers and the consequence of that to the public.
Thank you, Oman. Vail, next question to you. And the work you're leading with SC42 is, of course, very important. Personally believe it's a really critical area to make sure we're deploying safe AI. But given the pace of technological change, given the scale of the challenge that we're talking about to meet some of these big challenges, how can standards enable innovation?
Thank you, Ian. That's a good question. And you don't often hear standards and innovation in the same sentence, although I think we should talk more about it. I'm going to use the work of SC42 to give 4 brief examples of how that actually happens. The first is we have quite novel approaches to deal with AI-specific issues. So by and large, AI is an IT technology and shares a lot with traditional systems, but there are aspects, like my colleagues have pointed out, to, for instance, the learning aspect, data bias, and so on. So for those of you familiar with standards like ISO 9001, ISO IEC 27001, which are called management system standards, we are taking a similar approach for AI with 42001, where we tie everything together and basically enable third-party audit, as well as increasing consumer confidence in the use of AI. So this is a very novel and innovative approach to solve a problem that's emerging and unique. And the management system standards is just one example. We have a whole number that we're dealing with. The second example I want to talk about is when we partner with application domain standards to enable new areas. So I think there's been a number that have been mentioned by my colleagues on the panel, so I'm not going to go through them, but from fintech to transportation to healthcare. So this, again, now we are able to take it to the next level. I believe one aspect that was brought up in a previous workshop was this idea of assisted active living and how AI is transforming that vertical by enabling things that would otherwise not be possible. The third is something that, for those of us that develop products and services, understand that as these systems get more and more complex, you have a limited set of resources to be able to work on a particular product. So we often use the term of being able to innovate on top of standards. So in our case, the standards can be used as a base that allows for industry to then take advantage of that and be able to innovate on top of it. Last but not least, like the first 2 speakers mentioned, when we think of, the labor force and we think of a particular region or country or globally, this is all about people. I have a 6-year-old and I'm constantly amazed at how much better he is at doing basic things that I was a lot older when I was learning, whether it's math or it's language. So by providing technology like AI through broad responsible adoption, we are also allowing for our future citizens to grow up and be more productive. So I believe that in turn has a knock-on effect on innovation. You don't, the more access is provided, the better it is. And of course, we partner with all sorts of organizations. One example is we work with the expert group on UNESCO for looking at adoption of AI. Thank you.
Thanks, Vail. Now, we are running a little late, so we're going to need to tighten up our responses and compress a few of the questions. And I've just received some questions from the audience, which I'm keen to get through. So, Vitasari, I'm going to ask you, the scale of the problem we've said is large. The challenge for all of us, the entire human race, is substantial. With that as context, why is it important to apply a gender lens when designing a digital transformation policy?
Thanks, Ian. I think the why will already been answered slightly in the previous presentation. However, it is very important also to stress that when we are designing policy, designing a product, including designing a digital transformation, without having a gender lens, then we're only designing for half of the population, which is men. But usually, if we use the gender lens, then we use a women-centered design, that's what we call it in Women's World Banking, is that we're actually addressing the need and we're designing for both men and women. Why? Because usually in our norms, women tend to have more barriers. So for example, when a fintech, for example, designing a financial solution that address the limitation of women that have to work at home, but also have to, so she doesn't have so much time to commute to go to the bank. So this solution that created by fintech can be applied to women, but also it simplifies the process for men. So having that women perspective when designing is important. And how to do that is to increase number of women when we're designing product or our solution or our policy, and also increasing the numbers of women in the decision maker so that the policy or the end product that are rolled out is having that perspective of women and addressing that this, there are different barriers, there are different needs between men and women that needs to be addressed in order to achieve the full potential of digital transformation.
Great. Following on from that, Ilham, question for you. In a country as populous as Indonesia, 275 million people, how do we ensure that everyone has access to tools provided by digital transformation, and how do we ensure that the majority of the population benefits from digital transformation?
Thanks for the question. First of all, if you talk about reaching everybody, there's a few aspects to answer this question. First of all, you have to talk about access, right? So access means basically that goes to infrastructure, right? So we have to make sure Indonesia is not only a lot of people, it's a big country with very different and complex islands that are very different from one another, and the status of the infrastructure in those very islands is very different from island to island, actually. So there are, Java is a small island and it's rather developed regarding its infrastructure. Papua is a very large island and we have half of that. And it's very difficult to even connect people from a technological standpoint of view because it's so complex. I mean, there's large jungles and high mountains and deep valleys, etc. So it's really complex. So infrastructure is one important aspect to look at, and Indonesia has been very good, I think, in delivering infrastructure to the we call it the last mile, right? The last mile. Sorry, the first mile. So basically, the backbone is there, which we call, there's a backbone consisting out of fiber optics, but where we struggle, and that is the last mile, basically delivering connectivity to the homes, to the individuals, to the offices, to the schools, hospitals, universities, et cetera, et cetera. And that, in the end, is not only a matter of technology, but it's a matter of affordability. So digital technology is still at a price point for many in Indonesia that is difficult, right? that's to say the least. And in the pandemic, you have seen that the government had to basically give something like a digital, call it a subsidy, to the households, particularly when it comes to learning. Many of, most, if not all schools were closed at some point in time, and then we really could see that there was gaps in the population. It's not only about knowing how to use it, but actually afford it. Yeah, so, and even if you can afford it, the quality of the connectivity varies, right? If you're in a city like Jakarta, it's very high speed and quite consistent. If you're somewhat in the outback, as we say in Indonesia as well, then it's hard, right? It's not only expensive, but it's also spotty. So connectivity is one thing. Then the other thing, of course, is goes back to digital literacy. So, and digital literacy is also something that varies from region to region. Actually, social strata-wise, if you are a professional working at a company that uses digital technology on a day-to-day basis, you're quite familiar with the tools. If you're a farmer or a fisherman, then you're probably not that familiar, if at all. And so there needs to be a lot of attention to making digital literacy basically more evenly spread among Indonesians. And how to measure that, I think some of the things are shown in my presentation. You see that at the UNDP Human Development Index, and that is measured actually throughout the country. And in today's world, I would even go as far, if you talk about human rights, in my view, connectivity, digital connectivity should be a human right. So by that, basically, you can make sure that, because it's not just a new technology, I would describe it as a meta technology. So many benefits you get are better and faster and cheaper delivered using digital technology, and actually potentially also better spread out in your population. But potentially, there's still challenges to be met infrastructure-wise, affordability, so the cost point, it needs to be clear. There are areas where you can have private companies basically offer the service, people can really afford it, and the cost is low because there's also a lot of people living in the country in that particular part. Others are not feasible commercially, so the government has to subsidize the delivery of the service there in a way in order to make sure that all the citizens get the same quality of service.
Thank you very much. That's a very comprehensive answer. And I think your comment about connectivity as a human right is a really interesting point. Yeah. The Declaration of Human Rights is now almost 70 years old. Yeah. And the question is, if we framed it today, would it look like it did 70 years ago? Val, I'm going to cheat a little bit and combine 3 questions for you. So if you could give a short but very comprehensive answer to these 3 questions. The question is about data and digital standards and making the world a better, more inclusive, fairer place. There is a subsequent question from Ferdy Beer, who has highlighted the 3 laws of robotics. The first law, robot may not injure a human. Second law, a robot must obey the orders given by humans. Third law, a robot must protect its own existence as long as it does not violate the first 2 laws. Given that you're working in AI and robots are autonomous, intelligent, artificially intelligent devices, and given the rest of the context, how is the work that you're doing in standards, in data and digital, and specifically AI, leading to a better, fairer world?
Yeah, thank you. So I will try to be brief and combine all 3 questions. Let me start with the first piece, which is how to leverage standards to build a fairer or more equal world. I think one component of this is who works on these standards. And one of the key differences that we're seeing is a huge amount of diversity in terms of who's showing up, right? First of all, it's not just the engineers or the marketeers behind the technology or the data scientists. It's also policymakers, it's ethicists, it's academics, it's economists. So, that makes a huge difference on the quality of the standards that come out. 2, we are an international standards committee, so we have representation from 50 countries that include delegates that are not just developing, but also using the standard. I think that makes a tremendous amount of difference. As my previous colleagues described, we need to have broad responsible adoption from the beginning. So that means dealing right up front with things like bias, ethics. So we have an entire program of work looking at how to deal with that. We have an an entire group looking at just trustworthiness, right? So this shows you how it's different. And finally, partnering with other organizations as we develop this. In terms of data, I think the question about data is really interesting, because as we've seen IT kind of move along, we've done a lot of innovation and connectivity, and we continue to compute, right? Today, I believe it's looking at data is important, but what does that actually mean? We hear people say like data is the new oil. Well, what are we doing in the standards world? I believe the key is coming up with deeper insights. As one of my colleagues said, how can you get more efficiency out of your production, or how can you get more meaningful information? And in order to do that, then we need to also make sure that when we look at all of this data, it's beneficial without the downside. So one key thing that we're using standards for is we're looking at properties of data, whether it's big data and we look at how you design compute systems to deal with that, or it's for AI where you're training an algorithm. The properties of the data are very key. So one series of standards that we're developing is on quality for AI and analytics using machine learning. Finally, I think when it comes to this data piece, it's important to look at the full ecosystem. So it's not just on the AI processing part, but as you kind of go across the different application domains, you're finding more and more people are looking at data and how it's being used. So the idea of data governance, or helping provide guidance as to how these systems can be used, is key. So personally, I think that's one of the most innovative areas, and areas that standards can make a huge amount of difference. In terms of the last point, I think this is a really interesting point. And I would note that most AI systems are not fully autonomous. I think it's great to use the robot example to illustrate the point, but it is a combination of all of the standards that we would build that would provide things. For example, learning is a little bit different than traditional IT systems, but we can use techniques that exist, like risk assessment or building a risk framework. Then in partnership with the vertical domains that deploy these systems, they can take our base horizontal standards, develop vertical standards that allow them to meet their environment. And of course, this is not a dialogue in vacuum. They would be working with regulators in their area. They'd be working with users in their area. So it's not a single silver bullet. It's more I guess maybe my takeaway message, it's the philosophy that the way we are developing standards now is very different than how we did it 30 years ago. We are taking these concerns, which is real concerns, privacy, trustworthiness, aspects of data, and addressing them up front so that we can get the benefit of broad adoption, but do it responsibly. Thank you.
Thanks, Vail. We're in our last minute, and I'm really keen to hear just one last thing from our panelists. Armin, if you're still there, I'd like to know very, very quickly the most important question or the most important issue that we should be thinking about as we move into this digitally transformed world. And if you could be really precise, please.
Right. I think I would tie it to your previous question with Asimov's 3 laws for robots. And it's quite interesting, but I think it's also 50 years old. And, the processes and the world has gone beyond that. I can understand why, when we're talking about technology, we want to be protective of us. And I think the world is split into two camps. One that says we need to be very careful how technology advances. The other camp, we need to let technology develop itself. I would want to look at this very, very briefly. I understand we're under time duress. I would ask for us to look at this from the biological level of extrapolation. For us to think that we are going to control technology, for us to think that we are essentially gods of technology, is a bit arrogant. Because if you look at the evolution, where we are and where life has been, we've been around for around only 300,000 years, whereas the life on this planet has been around for 4 billion years. For us to think that in this small amount of time, somehow we are the end of the evolutionary chain, therefore, creation that we have in this case, technology belongs to us, and then we're going to apply the three laws that Asimov speaks in his book about controlling robots or controlling artificial intelligence. I think it's a bit precarious. I think we need to look beyond that. What if technology, and the purpose of technology is to help us, for us to move forward and beyond the limitations that we have as human species? In order to do that, we cannot ourselves be able to control something that's going to help us to move forward. Just one last statement. There's a very prominent scientist and writer, Max Tegmark, is the book. He has written, I think it's called Life 3.0. In there, he says, imagine if the whole world was 5-year-old kids, and you were the only adult left on the planet. And then you're trying to help these 5-year-old kids, for them to grow, for them to prosper. But because they're 5-year-old, they're looking at you and you're massively different than anything that they have seen. So they tie you down. They're trying to control you. The question is, you as an adult have very limited ways to explain to these 5-year-olds, look, whatever it is that I'm trying to do for the benefit of you. And no matter how these 5-year-olds are going to try to tie you down, at some point, you're going to find a way to free yourself. So the question is, us being the 5-year-olds, if, once the technology progresses to a limit, and then we're trying to control it. Question how long we're going to try to control it, or whether we should. And if we look at the trajectory of our of human evolution, in our domain as humans, I think we need to feed the technology, and I think here what our colleague Weil was mentioning, what needs to be done in terms of data and data structuring, computing becomes essential. So for transformative technology, I think we need to look at it slightly differently, not as an enemy, not someone or something that's going to come to destroy, but something and someone that we can actually collaborate with and partner with.
Yeah. I'm sorry, we're getting the wind up. We're actually a few minutes over. Vitasari and Ilman, could I just get really short, sharp, punchy, most important issue, most important question?
Sure, thanks Ian. I think from my side it's to that applying gender lens in designing digital transformation is a must. Not only that it is the right thing to do, but it is a smart thing to do, because it's cost efficient and it also realizes the full potential of digital transformation. And standard, innovation, and inclusion must go hand in hand.
Wonderful, thank you. Ilham, last word to you.
Yeah, thanks. I think one thing that came into my mind is basically that if you think about digital transformation, of course, one has innovation in our mind. At the same time, if you think about innovation, some of us think, and I think it's true, that innovation is also thinking outside the box. Meaning, if we think about standards is actually defining the box. So what do? So basically, we have to realize that standards is also developing. Right? So standards need to be adjusting and basically accompanying and, in fact, sometimes helping innovation in order to get where we want to go.
Great, fantastic. Please join me in thanking our panel.
Ladies and gentlemen, once again, please give a big round of applause to our keynote speaker, Ian Opperman, and also our panelists of speakers with the second session, Accelerating Digital Transformation at the G20 International Standards Summit 2022. To our participants and also delegates that's joining us through virtually, we will have a break until 2 o'clock or 2 p.m. Indonesian Central Time or Bali time. So once again, we're going to have a break momentarily until 2 p.m. Bali time, and we'll see you again for the third and also the fourth session, including call to action of the G20 International Standards Summit. So we'll see you then. Thank you.